The entire town watched as Maribel stood in the dirt street, her worn boots planted firm, staring down the man who'd just publicly proposed marriage to a stranger. She'd come here for work, honest work, not charity, not rescue. The crowd waited for her to accept, to be grateful, to know her place. Instead, she said one word that would mark her forever: no. In that moment, she became everything they feared, a woman who refused to bend. They gave her a week before she'd crawl back begging. They had no idea who they were dealing with. If you want to see how far defiance can take someone in a world built to break them, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of Miller's General Store, throwing up dust that hung in the late afternoon air like a question nobody wanted to answer. Maribel climbed down before the driver could offer his hand, her carpetbag clutched tight against her side. The weight of it, everything she owned pressing against her ribs, felt lighter than the stairs already gathering from the wooden sidewalk. She'd been traveling for 3 weeks. Her dress was the color of road dust now, the hem stiff with dried mud from 2 states back. Her hands ached from gripping the bag, knuckles white, then red, then white again with each jolt of the wheels. But she was here. Coldwater, Montana. The place that was supposed to be different. The letter in her pocket had been specific. Cook wanted. Bar W Ranch. Room and fair wages. Reply to Caleb Ward. She'd written back immediately, her script careful and neat despite the lamp oil running low in her Kansas City boarding house room. She told him about her experience cooking for the railroad crews, about managing kitchens that fed 50 men at a time, about her references from 3 different foremen. She hadn't mentioned that she was a woman. The name Mara could go either way, and she'd learned years ago that some doors only opened if you didn't give people a reason to slam them first. His response had been brief. Position available. Arrive by month's end. Wire ahead with stage schedule. She'd sold everything that wouldn't fit in the carpetbag. The stage ticket had taken most of her savings. She'd eaten nothing but hard bread and dried apples for the last week of travel, rationing her money down to the final dollar that currently sat in her boot, pressed against her ankle bone like a promise she'd made to herself. The town spread out before her in shades of brown and gray. False front buildings lined both sides of the main street, their paint peeling in long strips that curled like wood shavings. Miller's General Store, Hutchkin's boarding house, the Silver Dollar Saloon, a livery stable that smelled of manure and hay even from here. At the far end of the street, a white church with a crooked steeple pointed toward clouds that looked like they were considering rain. A group of men stood outside the saloon, watching her with the kind of attention that made her jaw tighten. 3 women in clean dresses whispered to each other near the boarding house steps, their eyes tracking Mara's every movement. She could feel them cataloging her, the travel-stained dress, the carpetbag, the way she stood alone with no man to meet her. She started toward the general store. Her boots made hollow sounds on the wooden sidewalk. The whispering followed her like smoke. The door to Miller's opened before she could reach for the handle. A man stepped out, tall and lean with sun-carved lines around his eyes. He wore work clothes that had seen actual work, denim worn soft at the knees, a shirt with 1 button missing, boots that had been resoled at least twice. His hat was pushed back, showing dark hair shot through with gray at the temples. He stopped when he saw her. Something shifted in his expression, recognition maybe, or surprise. His eyes dropped to the carpetbag, then back to her face. "Miss Bell?" His voice carried across the sudden silence that had fallen over the street. Mara felt the weight of it, the way every person in earshot had gone still. "Mr. Ward?" She kept her voice level, professional. This was a business arrangement. She'd traveled halfway across the country for a job, and she intended to start it tomorrow morning, if not sooner. He didn't move. His eyes stayed on her face, reading something she couldn't identify. Behind him, she could see into the store, shelves packed with dry goods, a pot-bellied stove in the corner, a woman behind the counter pretending not to watch. "You're a woman." He said it flat, like he was stating a fact he couldn't quite believe. "I'm a cook." Mara shifted the carpetbag to her other hand. "A good one, as I detailed in my letter." "Your letter didn't mention—" He stopped, rubbed his jaw. The rasp of stubble carried in the quiet. "I expected a man." "You expected a cook." "I'm here to cook." She could feel the street watching them. could feel the whispers building like pressure behind a dam. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to arrive, meet her employer, get settled in the ranch kitchen, start work, prove herself through competence, not conversation. Caleb Ward looked past her, toward the group of men outside the saloon. Something in his face changed, a decision being made or maybe a calculation. When he looked back at her, his expression had gone careful. "Miss Bell, I think we should talk privately about— Is there a problem with my employment?" She cut him off. Polite, but firm. She'd learned that tone working her way up from scullery maid to head cook. The tone that said she wouldn't be dismissed without cause. "The situation is more complicated than— Mr. Ward." She set the carpetbag down. Her back was starting to ache from the journey. Her feet hurt, and she'd been rehearsing this moment for 3 weeks. She wasn't going to let it fall apart in the street. "I have experience managing large kitchens. I have references from 3 railroad construction camps and 2 mining operations. I can feed 50 men 3 meals a day, keep accurate accounts, and manage provisions for a full season. I understood the position included room and wages of $30 a month. Have the terms changed? May check." He was quiet for a long moment. The wind picked up, sending dust devils spinning down the street. Somewhere a door banged shut. "The terms haven't changed," he said finally, "but I didn't expect— Miss Bell, a woman living alone at a ranch with 15 men is going to cause talk." "Then they can talk." His eyebrows went up slightly. "You don't understand how small towns work. I understand how kitchens work. That's what you hired me for." Someone laughed from the direction of the saloon. It wasn't a kind sound. Caleb's jaw tightened. He glanced toward the sound, then back at her. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "Miss Bell, I'm trying to help you here. There's a decent boarding house right there." He gestured toward Hutchkins' place. "Mrs. Hutchkins could probably use help in her kitchen. Town work. It would be more appropriate." The word landed like a stone. Mara had heard versions of this speech her entire working life. Appropriate, proper, seemly. All the words that meant stay small, stay quiet, stay in your place. "I didn't travel 3 weeks for town work," she said. "I came for the position you advertised. If you're rescinding the offer, say so clearly. Otherwise, I'd like to get settled before dark." They stared at each other. She could see him thinking, weighing options. She kept her face neutral, even though her heart was hammering against her ribs. If he said no, if he turned her away, she had exactly $1 and no plan beyond this moment. "Ward!" a voice called from across the street. "That your new cook?" More laughter. Caleb's face darkened. "Problem solved itself, looks like." Another voice. "Pretty thing like that, you won't need to look far for solutions." Mara didn't turn toward the voices. She kept her eyes on Caleb Ward, watching him decide who she was going to be to him. An employee, a complication, or something worse. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Miss Bell, those men aren't wrong about one thing. If you come out to the ranch, people are going to assume—" He stopped, started again. "A single woman living in close quarters with ranch hands. You understand what that looks like. I understand that I'm here to cook. What it looks like is your men getting fed properly for the first time in however long you've been managing without a decent cook. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple." She was tired, bone-tired. Her feet hurt. The last of her money was digging into her ankle. She'd bet everything on this job, and she wasn't going to watch it slip away because of gossip that hadn't even started yet. "I can do the work. That's all that should matter." In a perfect world, yes. Caleb pulled off his hat, ran his hand through his hair. But this isn't a perfect world. This is Coldwater, Montana, and people here have long memories and short patience for anything that looks irregular. Then I'll be regular. I'll cook, keep the kitchen, and mind my own business. It won't matter what you do. They'll talk anyway. Let them. He studied her face. She kept it steady, even though she wanted to scream. Even though 3 weeks of bad food and hard travel and uncertainty was pressing down on her shoulders like a physical weight. "You're not going to make this easy, are you?" he said. "I'm going to make your men good food. That's what you need." Something that might have been respect flickered across his face, or maybe resignation. It was hard to tell. "All right," he said, "but there's one way to make this work, one way that might—" He stopped, looked at her harder. How old are you? 28. Ever been married? The question hit like cold water. Mara's hands clenched. That's not relevant to my cooking. Miss Bell, I'm trying to find a solution that protects your reputation and mine. If we were, he stopped again, took a breath. If you were my wife, nobody could say anything. You'd have a proper place at the ranch. The men would respect that. And you'd have protection. The street had gone completely silent. Mara heard the words, understood them, felt them settle into the air between them like snow that was just starting to fall. He was proposing, offering marriage, to a woman he'd met 5 minutes ago, because her being his cook was too scandalous, but being his wife would somehow be acceptable. You're joking. Her voice came out flat. I'm practical. He held his hat in both hands now, turning it slowly. You need the position. I need a cook. This solves both problems. This creates about a dozen new ones. Does it? You'd have security, a home, respectability. I'd have someone running the kitchen who knows what they're doing. We could come to an arrangement. No. The word came out harder than she meant it, louder. She saw him flinch slightly. Miss Bell? No. She picked up her carpet bag. I came here for honest work, not charity, not rescue, not some arrangement where I trade my name for respectability. You're not thinking clearly. You just got off a 3-week stage journey. You're tired. Let's talk about this tomorrow when there's nothing to talk about. She could feel eyes on her from every direction now, the whole town watching this moment, cataloging it, preparing to discuss it over dinner and breakfast and every meal for the next month. I'm a cook. You advertised for a cook. Either I have the job as a cook or I don't have it at all. Caleb's face had gone still. You're making a mistake. That's my right. You don't understand what you're refusing. I understand perfectly. She met his eyes. You're offering me a cage with prettier bars. I've seen those before. I'm not interested. The silence stretched out. Someone coughed. A horse stamped in the livery stable. The wind pushed dust down the street in slow spirals. You won't last a week, Caleb said quietly. Without protection, without respectability, this town will eat you alive. Then I'll have a very educational week. She turned and walked toward Hutchkin's boarding house, her back straight, her grip on the carpet bag white-knuckled. She didn't let herself look back, even though she could feel his stare like a brand between her shoulder blades. The 3 women on this boarding house steps scattered as she approached. One of them, older, with iron gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, blocked the doorway. Mrs. Hutchkins? Mara kept her voice polite. I saw what just happened out there. The woman's eyes were chips of flint. Saw you refuse a decent proposal from a decent man. I'm looking for a room. I can pay. She could pay for maybe 3 nights if she was careful. After that, she'd figure something out. I run a respectable establishment. I don't house women who make spectacles of themselves in the street. I need a room, just until I can make other arrangements. You had arrangements. You just turned them down in front of half the town. Mrs. Hutchkins crossed her arms. I won't have that kind of behavior under my roof. Won't have people thinking I encourage it. Mara felt something cold settle in her stomach. I'm willing to work. I can help in your kitchen in exchange for... I heard you're a cook. Heard you came all this way for ranch work. Heard you think you're too good for an honest proposal. The woman's voice carried, meant to carry. Well, you made your choice. Live with it. But not here. The door shut in her face. Mara stood on the steps. The carpet bag seemed heavier now. Behind her she could hear murmuring, feel the attention like heat on her back. She turned around slowly. The whole street was watching. Men outside the saloon, women clustered in doorways, even children had stopped playing to stare. Every eye on her. Every face already settled into judgment. Caleb Ward still stood where she'd left him, near the general store. His expression was unreadable. Mara walked back toward him, each step deliberate. When she stopped, she was close enough to see the surprise in his eyes. The ranch, she said quietly. How do I get there? Miss Bell? Oh, I'm not accepting your proposal, but I came here for a job. If that job is still available, I'll take it. As a cook, nothing else. He looked at her for a long moment. You're serious? Completely. The men aren't going to make this easy. And the town, he glanced around. You just saw what the town thinks. I don't care what they think. You should. But he sighed, settling his hat back on his head. The ranch is 6 miles northwest. I've got a wagon at the livery. We can leave now if you want. I want. You understand what you're walking into. I understand I need to work. You need a cook. Everything else is noise. He studied her face one more time, then nodded slowly. All right, your funeral. At least I'll die employed. His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Come on then, before this gets any worse. They walked to the livery stable together. The silence felt thick enough to chew. Mara kept her eyes forward, her back straight. She could feel every stare like a needle in her spine. At the livery, Caleb spoke briefly with the stable hand, a boy of maybe 15 who kept shooting glances at Mara like she might explode. The wagon was brought around, a sturdy flatbed with space for supplies in the back. Caleb loaded her carpet bag next to several sacks of flour and a crate of canned goods. Up you go. He offered his hand to help her onto the seat. She took it. His palm was calloused, rough with work. He didn't hold on longer than necessary. The wagon rolled out of town slowly. Mara looked straight ahead, but she could see people watching from windows, doorways, the gaps between buildings, storing this moment away, preparing their versions of the story. Did you see? Refused him flat out. What kind of woman travels alone like that, living with all those men? She'll be back in a week, mark my words. The voices followed them to the edge of town, then faded into the sound of wheels on dirt and the rhythmic clopping of the horses' hooves. They rode in silence for the first mile. The landscape opened up around them, rolling grassland interrupted by stands of pine, mountains rising blue in the distance. The sky was enormous here, bigger than any sky Mara had ever seen. It made her feel small and exposed at the same time. You're making a mistake, Caleb said finally. He didn't look at her. I meant that. About the town. You said that already. It's worth repeating. These people, they're not cruel exactly, but they're afraid of anything different, anything that disrupts the order they understand. I'm just a cook. You're a single woman refusing marriage to take work that puts you alone with men. That's not just anything around here. Mara watched the horizon. In Kansas City, I managed a kitchen that fed railroad crews, 50 men a day. Some of them fresh off the boat, speaking 6 different languages. Some of them hadn't seen a woman in months. You know how many of them bothered me? How many? Once, one man, one time. She kept her voice level. I broke his wrist with a cast iron pan. After that, everybody was very respectful. Caleb made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. The ranch hands aren't railroad workers. People are people. They'll test boundaries. I'll set them. We'll reach an understanding. You sound very sure of yourself. I'm sure of what I can do. The rest is just noise. They rode another mile before he spoke again. Why ranch work? You could have stayed in the city, found something safer. Safer doesn't always mean better. That's not an answer. Mara was quiet. The question touched something she didn't usually let people see. The real reason she'd jumped at this opportunity. Why she'd spent her last dollar getting here. I'm tired of walls, she said finally. Tired of kitchens that look out on brick buildings and coal smoke. Tired of going to sleep with the sound of the city pressing in from every side. She gestured at the landscape around them. This is different, open, quiet. It's also isolated, brutal in winter, unforgiving. So was the city. At least here I can see the horizon. He glanced at her. You're running from something. I'm running toward something. There's a difference. Not much of one. They crested a rise and the ranch came into view. It wasn't much, a main house, a bunkhouse, a barn that had seen better days, several corrals, a chicken coop. Everything looked weathered, functional, built for purpose rather than appearance. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney in a thin gray line. Home, Caleb said. There was something in his voice that might have been pride or resignation. Bar W Ranch, 20,000 acres of possibility and problems. As they got closer, Mara could see men moving around the yard. They stopped when they spotted the wagon, watching it approach with the same attention the town had given her earlier. Caleb pulled up near the main house. The men drifted closer, 6 of them, ranging from a boy who looked barely 20 to a grizzled man who might have been 60. They all had the same look: sun-weathered skin, work-hardened hands, eyes that measured everything twice. "Boys," Caleb said, climbing down from the wagon, "this is Miss Bell. She's the new cook." The silence was immediate and heavy. One of the men, tall, with a mustache that drooped past his chin, spoke first. "Cook?" "That's right. Miss Bell will be managing the kitchen starting tomorrow." "Miss?" The youngest one said it like he was testing the word. "We got a lady cook?" "We've got a cook who happens to be a woman. There's a difference." Caleb's voice had gone hard. "And you'll all remember that difference every time you interact with her. She's here to work. You're here to work. Act accordingly." The man with the mustache shifted his weight. "Boss, can we talk about this?" "Nothing to talk about. Kitchen's been a disaster since old Pete died. Miss Bell has experience feeding crews twice our size. She starts tomorrow." He turned to help Mara down from the wagon. She didn't wait for his hand. Climbed down herself, landing with a small thud in the dirt. Picked up her carpet bag. The men stared. She stared back. "Miss Bell," Caleb said, "I'll show you the kitchen and your quarters. Men, get back to work. We've got fence to mend before dark." He led her toward the main house. It was larger up close, 2 stories, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The wood was gray with age, but solid. Everything here looked solid, built to last. Inside, the house was simple: a large main room with a stone fireplace, stairs leading up, doors opening to other rooms, and through an archway, the kitchen. It was bigger than she expected. A cast-iron stove dominated one wall, with plenty of counter space and shelving. A large table in the center, scarred with knife marks and water stains, but sturdy. Windows that looked out on the yard. A door that led to what she assumed was a pantry. "It's not fancy," Caleb said. "It's functional. That's better." She set her carpet bag down and moved through the space, cataloging everything. The stove was old but well-maintained. The shelves were dusty. The counter needed a good scrubbing. There were pots and pans hanging from hooks, but they looked like they hadn't been properly cleaned in weeks. "What happened to old Pete?" she asked. "Heart gave out 3 months ago. We've been managing on our own since then. Badly." Caleb leaned against the doorframe. "Men can work cattle, mend fence, break horses. Can't cook worth a damn. We've been living on beans and hardtack and whatever doesn't poison us." Mara opened the pantry door. It was chaos inside. Sacks of flour and rice stacked haphazardly, canned goods without organization, what looked like an old ham hanging from a hook that might have been there since the previous century. "I'll need supplies," she said. "Good supplies, not whatever's cheapest." "Make a list. We go to town once a month for provisions." "I'll need more than that at first, to get organized." "Make the list anyway. We'll figure it out." She turned to face him. "And the men? Are they going to be a problem?" "Probably." He said it honestly. "They're not bad men, but they're set in their ways. Having a woman here is going to upset the balance. I'm not here to balance anything. I'm here to cook." "You keep saying that like it makes everything simple." "It does," he sighed. "Your quarters are upstairs, second door on the left. It's small but private. You'll have your own space, separate from the men." "Good. Miss Bell—" He stopped, started again. "What happened in town today? That's going to follow you here. The men are going to hear about it. They're going to have opinions." "Let them have opinions. As long as they eat what I cook and treat me with basic respect, we'll be fine. And if they don't—" She met his eyes. "Then I'll handle it. Same way I always have." He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "All right, supper is at 6, breakfast at 5. Lunch you can pack for them to take out to wherever they're working. Think you can manage that by tomorrow?" "I can manage it by tonight if you want." "Tomorrow's fine. Get settled first." He pushed off from the doorframe. "I need to check on the men. You know where to find me if you need anything." He left. Mara stood alone in the kitchen. Through the window, she could see the men working in the yard, their movements slow and deliberate. One of them glanced toward the house, then quickly away. She picked up her carpet bag and climbed the stairs. The second door on the left opened into a small room with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. The floor was bare wood. The walls were plain. There was a hook on the back of the door for hanging clothes. It was the nicest room she'd had in 3 years. Mara set the carpet bag on the bed and sat down beside it. The mattress was thin but clean. The whole room smelled faintly of pine and dust. She pulled off her boots. Her feet ached. Her back ached. Everything ached. The dollar bill was still in her boot, damp with sweat. She smoothed it out and set it on the dresser. $1. A job that might last. A room of her own. And a town full of people waiting for her to fail. She stood up and walked to the window. The sun was lower now, painting the grasslands gold. In the distance, she could see cattle moving slowly across the range. The mountains rose like promises on the horizon. This place was beautiful, harsh and beautiful, and completely indifferent to whether she succeeded or failed. She liked that. Liked that her worth here would be measured in results, not reputation. In what she could do, not what people thought of her. The town could talk. The men could doubt. It didn't matter. She was here to work. And work was the one thing she'd always known how to do. Mara turned from the window and started unpacking. She had exactly 4 dresses, all variations of the same practical design, 2 pairs of stockings, 1 extra pair of boots, a hairbrush, a small Bible her mother had given her years ago that she hadn't opened in months, and wrapped in cloth at the bottom, her knives. She lifted them out carefully. 6 knives, each one chosen for a specific purpose, each one kept sharp enough to shave with. These were her real tools, her real weapons. She set them on the dresser in a row. Tomorrow she'd start proving why she'd traveled 3 weeks for this job. Tomorrow she'd show these men what a real cook could do. But tonight she stood at the window and watched the sun set over land that didn't care about her past, her reputation, or her name. Land that would judge her only by what she could make of this moment. And that was all she'd ever wanted. A chance. Mara woke at 4:30, habit pulling her from sleep before the sun could break the horizon. The room was cold enough that her breath made small clouds in the darkness. She dressed quickly, layering her warmest dress over 2 petticoats, her fingers clumsy with the buttons. The house was silent around her, that particular quality of quiet that comes just before a place wakes up. She took her knives downstairs. The kitchen was darker than her room, the windows showing nothing but black. She found matches on a shelf and lit 2 oil lamps, their glow pushing back the shadows. The stove was cold. She opened it, checking the firebox. Someone had banked coals the night before, probably Caleb, and they were still alive beneath the ash. She added kindling, blew gently until flames caught, then loaded in larger pieces of wood. While the stove heated, she explored the pantry properly. What she'd seen yesterday was worse in detail. Flour sacks stored directly on the dirt floor, already showing signs of moisture damage. Rice that hadn't been sealed, probably attracting mice. The ham hanging from the hook was so old it had gone black, definitely beyond salvaging. She pulled it down and set it aside. The canned goods were in better shape, at least. Tomatoes, peaches, beans, some condensed milk. She found eggs in a basket that needed cleaning, and when she checked them against the lamp, most were still good. In a corner, she discovered a bag of coffee beans that smelled like they'd been there since statehood. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. She ground coffee, measuring by instinct, and set it to boil in a large pot. Then she started on biscuits, working the dough with quick, efficient movements. Her hands knew this rhythm the way other people knew prayers. Flour, lard, buttermilk. Except there was no buttermilk, so she used regular milk and a splash of vinegar to sour it. The dough came together stiff and rough. She rolled it out on the scarred table, cut rounds with the rim of a glass, and arranged them in a baking pan. The eggs went into another pan with salt and a little of the condensed milk to stretch them. She found potatoes in a bin outside the pantry door, checked them for rot, and diced the good ones for frying. There was bacon hanging in the cold room, a separate shed she'd discovered last night, built on the north side of the house where the sun never hit. The bacon was decent quality, thick cut and properly smoked. By the time the sky started graying outside the windows, the kitchen smelled like coffee and fresh biscuits and frying meat. Mara moved between stove and table, her body settling into the familiar dance of cooking for a crowd. This was what she knew. This was where she was competent. She heard boots on the stairs, heavy footsteps crossing the main room. Then Caleb appeared in the kitchen doorway, stopping short when he saw her. "You're up early." "Breakfast is at 5. You said so yourself." He moved to the coffee pot, poured himself a cup, drank it black, standing at the counter. "Old Pete never started before 5:30. "I'm not Old Pete." "No." He watched her flip bacon. You're not. The silence stretched out, filled with the sound of sizzling meat and the soft whistle of the coffee pot. Mara kept working, ignoring the way his eyes tracked her movements. She wasn't here to make conversation. She was here to cook. The men are going to be surprised, he said finally. Good. Surprise keeps people honest. Or defensive. Then they'll get over it. She pulled the biscuits from the oven, golden and steaming. Unless you want me to make bad food to protect their feelings. His mouth twitched. Make whatever you want. I'm just warning you. Consider me warned. He finished his coffee and went outside. Through the window, she watched him cross to the bunkhouse. A few minutes later, men started emerging, pulling on coats against the morning cold. They moved toward the main house slowly, like they weren't sure what to expect. Mara set plates on the table, arranged the biscuits in a basket, put out butter she'd found in the cold room, honey in a jar, the bacon on a platter. The eggs went into a serving bowl, the potatoes into another, coffee cups lined up along the counter. The door opened. The men filed in, 6 of them plus Caleb. They stopped when they saw the table. Jesus, someone said softly. Sit down, Mara said, before it gets cold. They sat slowly, eyeing the food like it might be a trick. The man with the drooping mustache, she'd heard Caleb call him Dutch, reached for a biscuit first, split it open, steam rose from the soft interior. Ma'am, he said, and his voice was careful. These look real fine. They're biscuits. Eat them. He did. His eyes widened. The other men watched him, then started reaching for their own food. For a few minutes, the only sound was eating, the clink of forks on plates, the scrape of knives through butter, the satisfied silence of men getting a decent meal for the first time in months. Mara poured coffee. When she set the pot down, the youngest one, barely out of boyhood, with red hair and freckles, looked up at her. Miss Bell, this is the best breakfast I've had since my mama's table. Your mama taught you good manners too, looks like. He flushed. Yes, ma'am. Dutch spoke around a mouthful of eggs. Boss said you cooked for railroad crews. That's right. How many men? 50 or so, sometimes more. He chewed thoughtfully. This is better than camp food. Camp food is trying not to kill you. I'm trying to make something that tastes good, different goals. One of the other men, older, with a scar across his cheek, grunted. You saying our cooking was trying to kill us? I'm saying I found a ham in your pantry that could have walked out on its own. So yes, probably. Dutch laughed. It broke something in the room, eased the tension that had been sitting on everyone's shoulders. Even the scarred man smiled, grudging but real. Caleb sat at the head of the table, eating quietly. He caught her eye once and gave a small nod. She turned back to the stove. When the men finished, they brought their plates to the counter without being asked. The red-headed boy lingered. Miss Bell? What's for lunch? Sandwiches. You can take them with you. Real sandwiches, not just bread and whatever? Real sandwiches. Now, get out of my kitchen so I can clean up. They filed out, quieter than they'd come in. Through the window, she watched them head toward the barn. They were talking among themselves, gestures animated. One of them, the youngest, kept looking back at the house. Dutch returned a few minutes later, hat in hand. Ma'am, just wanted to say thank you for the breakfast. You're welcome. And I wanted to apologize for yesterday. How we acted when you arrived, that wasn't right. Mara turned to face him. His expression was genuine, uncomfortable with the apology, but meaning it anyway. You were surprised, she said. I understand that. Still wasn't right. He shifted his weight. We've been without proper meals for a while. Makes a man forget his manners. Won't happen again. Good. He nodded once and left. Mara cleaned the kitchen with the same efficiency she'd cooked. Dishes washed and stacked, table scrubbed, floor swept. By the time she finished, the sun was fully up, painting the yard in long shadows. She made the sandwiches, thick slices of bread, leftover bacon, the last of the eggs fried fresh, wrapped each one in cloth and packed them in a basket. Caleb came for them just before the men headed out to work. They're talking about you, he said. I'd be worried if they weren't. No, I mean, they're impressed. Dutch said it's the first time in 3 months he hasn't felt hungry by mid-morning. Good. Hungry men work poorly. Miss Bell. He picked up the basket. I know I said this yesterday, but I'm saying it again. Thank you for taking the job, He gestured vaguely. All of this. You're paying me. That's thanks enough. Still, I know it wasn't easy, coming here dealing with the town. Mara met his eyes. The town doesn't matter. This does. The work matters. He studied her face for a moment. You really believe that, don't you? I have to. He left with the sandwiches. Mara watched from the window as the men mounted up and rode out, heading toward whatever section of fence needed mending today. The ranch felt empty without them, the silence pressing in from all sides. She went back to the pantry and started taking inventory, made a list of what they had, what they needed, what was salvageable, and what needed to be thrown out. The work filled the morning, kept her hands busy and her mind focused. Around noon, she heard a wagon approach. She looked out to see a small buckboard pulling into the yard, driven by a girl of maybe 12 or 13, dark hair pulled back in a braid, a dress that was too short in the sleeves like she'd grown faster than her clothes could keep up. The girl climbed down and walked to the kitchen door, knocked softly. Mara opened it. Can I help you? Are you Miss Bell? The girl's voice was quiet, uncertain. I am. I'm Elsie. Elsie Ward, Mr. Ward's daughter. Mara blinked. Caleb hadn't mentioned a daughter, hadn't mentioned any family at all. Does your father know you're here? He knows. I live in town with Mrs. Hutchkins during the week. Come out weekends to help with the house. Elsie twisted her hands in her apron. He asked me to bring you these. She held out a basket. Inside were fresh vegetables, carrots, turnips, some early lettuce. Real food, not canned goods or dried staples. Mrs. Hutchkins grows them, Elsie said. Pa trades for them sometimes. That's kind of him. Mara took the basket. And kind of you to bring them. The girl's face brightened slightly. Would it be all right if I came inside just for a minute? Mara stepped back. Of course. Elsie entered like she was walking into church, eyes wide as she took in the clean kitchen. It looks different, smells different. I cleaned. Old Pete never cleaned much, said it was a waste of time when it'd just get dirty again. She moved to the table, ran her hand across the scrubbed surface. Pa said you made biscuits this morning, said the men couldn't stop talking about them. They were hungry, makes everything taste better. Could you? Elsie stopped, started again. Could you teach me how to make them? Mara set the basket down. You don't know how to make biscuits? Mrs. Hutchkins says I'm too clumsy, says I waste ingredients. She doesn't let me do much cooking. There was something in the girl's voice, a careful blankness that Mara recognized from her own youth, the sound of someone who'd been told too many times that they weren't good enough. Biscuits are easy, Mara said. You have time now. Elsie's whole face changed. Really? You'd show me? Why not? Come on. They worked together at the table, Mara talking through each step. Flour, lard, milk. The right consistency for the dough, not too wet, not too dry. How to fold it gently so the biscuits stayed tender. Elsie listened with complete focus, her hands following Mara's instructions carefully. Mrs. Hutchkins says my hands are too heavy, she said as she worked the dough. Your hands are fine. You're just thinking too much. Baking isn't about being perfect. It's about understanding what the dough needs. How do you know what it needs? Practice, time, paying attention to how it feels. They cut the biscuits and slid them into the oven. While they baked, Elsie cleaned up without being asked, moving around the kitchen like she was trying not to take up too much space. Miss Bell, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why did you come here? To the ranch? Mara considered the question. I needed work. Your father needed a cook. But you could have stayed in town. Mrs. Hutchkins said... She stopped. What did Mrs. Hutchkins say? Elsie's face went pink. Nothing. I shouldn't repeat gossip. It's all right. I know what people are saying. It's not fair. The words came out fierce, surprising both of them. What they're saying about you. You just wanted to work. That's not wrong. Some people think it is. Well, they're stupid. Mara smiled despite herself. Careful. That's dangerous talk. I don't care. I'm tired of people in this town thinking they know everything about everyone. Elsie's hands clenched in her apron. They think I don't hear what they say. About Pa. About my mother leaving. About how he can't manage things on his own. They whisper, but they want me to hear, want me to know they're talking. Your mother left? 4 years ago. Just left one day, took the morning stage and never came back. Elsie's voice had gone flat. Pa doesn't talk about it. Mrs. Hutchins says it's because she couldn't handle ranch life. Says some women aren't built for it. Mara checked the biscuits, pulling them from the oven when they'd turned golden. And what do you think? I think... Elsie stopped. I don't know. I was 9. I just remember waking up and she was gone. Pa had to scramble to find someone to watch me. That's how I ended up with Mrs. Hutchins. Do you like living with her? The girl's silence was answer enough. Mara split one of the hot biscuits, buttered it, and handed it to Elsie. Try this. Elsie took a bite. Her eyes widened. I made this? You did. It's good. It's really good. Because you followed the steps, paid attention. That's all cooking is. They ate in comfortable silence. Outside, the shadows were lengthening. Elsie kept glancing at the window, tracking the sun's position. I should get back, she said finally. Mrs. Hutchins doesn't like it when I'm late for supper. Thank you for the vegetables. Could I... Elsie hesitated. Could I come back? Maybe you could show me other things? I promise I won't be a bother. You're not a bother. Come whenever you want. The girl's smile was sudden and bright. She gathered her shawl and headed for the door, then stopped. Miss Bell? What they said in town about you not lasting a week. They're wrong. I can tell. How can you tell? Because you're still here. After Elsie left, Mara stood in the empty kitchen. The day's work was done. Breakfast made, lunch packed, dinner preparation started. Everything clean and organized. The kind of day she'd had 1,000 times before in a dozen different kitchens. But something felt different. The conversation with Elsie had cracked something open, not in the girl, but in Mara herself. The reminder that other people carried their own weight, their own stories. She started on dinner, beef stew, using meat from the cold room and the vegetables Elsie had brought. The routine steadied her, chopping, browning, seasoning, adding water and letting everything simmer while she made more biscuits, because the men had demolished the breakfast batch. When Caleb and the crew came back at dusk, the kitchen was warm and the food was ready. They ate with the same focused attention as breakfast, but this time there was conversation. Talk about the fence they'd mended, the cattle they'd moved, plans for tomorrow. Dutch asked about supplies. You gonna need anything from town? A lot of things. Mara had her list ready. The pantry's in rough shape. We're not due for a supply run for 2 more weeks. I can make do until then. But after that, I'll need regular access to better ingredients. The scarred man, she'd learned his name was Frank, spoke up. Better ingredients cost money. And they make better food, which means your men work better, which means more work gets done. It pays for itself. Frank grunted but didn't argue. After dinner, the men drifted back to the bunkhouse. Caleb lingered, helping her clear plates. You don't have to do that, she said. I know. He stacked dishes by the sink. Elsie came by today. She did. Brought vegetables. She tell you about her mother? Some. He was quiet for a moment. Marie couldn't handle the isolation. I don't blame her. This life, it's not for everyone. But you stayed. This is my land, my work. I can't imagine being anywhere else. He looked out the window at the darkening yard. Elsie's been asking to spend more time out here. I've been saying no because there's no woman around to... He stopped. I know you're here to cook, not to be a substitute mother. I'm not asking for that. She's a good kid. She is. Smart. Capable. Mrs. Hutchins doesn't see it, but... He rubbed his jaw. Anyway, if Elsie wants to come out more often, I won't stop her, as long as it doesn't interfere with your work. It won't. Good. He headed for the door, then paused. The men are settling in, accepting you. That's good. But the town, I know. Do you? Because word's going to spread about you being here, about the situation, and people are going to make it ugly. Let them. You keep saying that like it doesn't bother you. Mara turned to face him fully. Mr. Ward, I've been working since I was 14 years old. I've been a scullery maid, a kitchen assistant, a cook's helper, and finally a head cook. Every step of the way, someone told me I couldn't do it, that I wasn't strong enough, smart enough, respectable enough. And every step of the way, I proved them wrong by doing the work. This is different. No, it's exactly the same. People talk because they need something to talk about. My job is to feed your men and keep this kitchen running. Everything else is noise. He studied her face in the lamplight. You're either very brave or very stubborn. Probably both. Fair enough. He put his hat on. Good night, Miss Bell. Good night. After he left, Mara finished the dishes and banked the stove for the morning, climbed the stairs to her small room, sat on the bed and removed her boots, her feet aching from standing all day. Through the window, she could see lights in the bunkhouse, hear the faint sound of men talking, someone playing a harmonica, the ranch settling into its evening rhythm. She'd made it through one day. One breakfast, one lunch, one dinner. The men had eaten well and nobody had challenged her right to be here. It was a start. The next few days fell into a pattern. Up before dawn, cooking breakfast, packing lunches, preparing dinner. The men came to expect her in the kitchen, stopped looking surprised when they found hot coffee waiting and food that actually tasted good. Dutch started bringing her eggs from the hen house without being asked. The red-headed boy, his name was Tommy, began splitting firewood for the stove each evening. But on the fourth day, when Caleb came back from a trip to town for salt and lamp oil, his face was tight. What happened? Mara asked. Nothing you need to worry about. That means it's about me. He set the supplies on the counter. Mrs. Hutchkins is spreading stories about you living here with the men. She's got half the church ladies convinced you're... He stopped. Convinced I'm what? A woman of poor character. She's saying you refused an honest proposal to pursue an improper arrangement. Her words, not mine. Mara's hand stilled on the bread she was kneading. And what did you say? I told her she was wrong, that you're here to cook and nothing else, that her gossip was uncharitable and false. I bet that went over well. She suggested I was being deceived by a woman of loose morals. Then she suggested I think about Elsie's reputation, having you around. Mara's jaw tightened. Elsie has nothing to do with this. I know that. You know that. Mrs. Hutchkins sees it differently. He pulled off his hat, ran his hand through his hair. She's threatening to refuse to keep Elsie during the week unless I send you away. The bread dough tore under Mara's hands. She looked down at it, forced herself to breathe slowly. Then send me away. What? If keeping me here costs Elsie her place in town, send me away. Find another cook. I'm not doing that. Why not? You said it yourself. Elsie needs someone during the week. You can't manage having her here and running the ranch. Miss Bell, I'm serious. I won't be the reason a child gets hurt. Caleb's voice went hard. You're not the reason. Mrs. Hutchkins is. She's using Elsie as leverage to control what happens on my ranch. He set his hat down with force. I'm not giving her that power. So what are you going to do? Bring Elsie out here, full time. You just said you can't manage that. I said I couldn't before. Now you're here. He met her eyes. If you're willing. I'm not asking you to raise her. Just be another adult in the house, someone she can talk to, learn from. People will say that makes it worse. A young girl living in a house with a woman they've already condemned. Let them say it. He echoed her own words back to her. Everything else is noise, right? Mara looked at him for a long moment. You're sure? I'm sure I'm tired of that woman dictating how I run my life. I'm sure Elsie's been unhappy in town for months, and I'm sure you're the best cook we've had in 5 years, and I'm not losing that because of gossip. The town's going to make this uglier. Probably. Can you handle it? Can you? His smile was grim. Guess we'll find out together. He brought Elsie home the next day. She arrived with a small trunk of belongings and eyes that were red from crying, though she wouldn't say why. Just hugged her father hard and then went upstairs to the room Mara had helped prepare, the one across from Mara's own. That night at dinner, Caleb made the announcement to the men. Elsie's going to be living here full-time now. I expect the same respect for her that you show Miss Bell. Understood? The men nodded. Dutch smiled at Elsie. Welcome home, little miss. Elsie's answering smile was small but genuine. After dinner, she helped Mara with the dishes. They worked in silence for a while, Elsie washing while Mara dried. Mrs. Hutchkins said terrible things about you, Elsie said finally, at church, in front of everyone. I figured. She said you were corrupting Pa. Corrupting me by association. She said a decent woman would have taken the proposal and been grateful. And what do you think? Elsie scrubbed a plate viciously. I think she's a mean old woman who likes making people feel small. I think she was happy having me there so she could feel like she was doing charity. And I think, her voice cracked, I think she only kept me because it gave her an excuse to keep tabs on Pa, to feel important. Mara set down the dish towel and turned to face the girl. What did she say to make you cry? She said if I came back here, I'd end up just like you, alone and desperate and willing to do anything for a place to sleep. Elsie's hands were shaking. She said no decent man would ever want to marry me if I stayed. Elsie. But I don't care. The words burst out fierce. I don't want to be like her. I don't want to spend my whole life judging people and finding them lacking. I'd rather be like you. I'd rather work hard and be good at something than be proper and miserable. Mara felt something catch in her chest. She pulled Elsie into a hug, feeling the girl shake against her. You're going to be fine, she said quietly. Better than fine. You're smart and you're strong and you've got your father and this ranch. That's more than most people ever get. Elsie nodded against her shoulder. Can I still learn to cook? Mrs. Hutchkins said it was a waste of time teaching me. Mrs. Hutchkins is wrong about a lot of things. Starting tomorrow, you're my assistant. The next few weeks blurred together. Mara taught Elsie the basics, how to manage a kitchen, plan meals, stretch ingredients. The girl learned fast, her earlier clumsiness disappearing as she gained confidence. Soon she was helping with breakfast, making lunch on her own, even attempting simple dinners under Mara's supervision. The men adapted to having both women in the house. They cleaned up after themselves better, watched their language, started treating the kitchen like something worth respecting instead of just a place to shovel food. But outside the ranch, things were getting worse. When they went to town for supplies, people stared. Women crossed the street to avoid them. The general store owner, a man named Miller who'd always been friendly to Caleb, served them in silence, his face carefully blank. Elsie bore it with her head high, but Mara could see the hurt in her eyes. They used to like me, she said on the ride home. Mrs. Patterson used to give me candy. Mr. Miller always asked about my schoolwork. They still like you, Caleb said. They're just scared of being associated with us. That's the same as not liking me. Yeah, it is. Mara watched the landscape roll past. It'll get better. Will it? Elsie's voice was small. Eventually. People have short memories. Something else will happen, and they'll forget all about us. But the next Sunday, when Caleb and Elsie went to church, Mara stayed home, knowing her presence would make things worse. Mrs. Hutchkins gave a speech. Elsie told them about it that night, her voice shaking. She stood up during announcements, said the congregation needed to be aware of the moral decay happening right under their noses. Said Pa was harboring a woman of questionable virtue and exposing his daughter to corrupting influences. She said anyone who associated with us was endorsing sin. Jesus, Caleb muttered. Then she announced a quilting bee, said it would include a cooking competition, said it was time to show everyone what real Christian women could do. Elsie looked at Mara. She's calling you out, in front of the whole town. Mara felt something cold settle in her stomach. A cooking competition. She wants to humiliate you, make you look incompetent in front of everyone. And if I don't participate, then you look like you're afraid, like you know you're not good enough. Elsie's hands clenched. It's a trap either way. Caleb's face was dark. You don't have to do this. We can ignore her. Ignoring her hasn't helped so far. So what? You're going to give her what she wants? Mara looked out the window at the ranch, her kitchen, her work, the place she'd built something worth having over the last month. Mrs. Hutchkins wanted to destroy that, wanted to prove Mara didn't belong, that she was exactly what the town thought she was. When is it? She asked. 2 weeks? Then I have 2 weeks to prepare. Miss Bell? No. She turned to face them both. I'm tired of running, tired of letting other people define who I am. If she wants a competition, she'll get one. And when I win, she'll have to eat every word she's said about me. Elsie's eyes went wide. You're really going to do it? I really am. Over the next 2 weeks, Mara worked harder than she ever had. She practiced recipes, tested combinations, refined techniques. She went through flour and butter and eggs at an alarming rate, the men becoming unwitting taste testers for her experiments. This is amazing, Tommy said through a mouthful of apple tart. What are you calling it? Practice. Dutch tried the same tart and shook his head. Miss Bell, if this is practice, I can't wait to see the real thing. Elsie helped with everything, taking notes on what worked and what didn't. They spent hours in the kitchen together, Mara explaining her thought process while Elsie absorbed every word. Why 3 types of sugar in the cake? Elsie asked. Because each one does something different. White for sweetness, brown for depth, molasses for darkness. Together they build complexity. But couldn't you just use one? I could, but one note isn't a song. You need harmony. The day before the competition, Caleb found Mara in the kitchen late at night. She was making a final batch of test biscuits, her hands moving automatically while her mind worked through tomorrow's timeline. You should be sleeping, he said. I will, soon. He poured himself coffee from the pot she'd kept warm. Are you nervous? Terrified. You don't look it. That's because I'm good at hiding it. She pulled the biscuits from the oven. What if I fail? What if I make a fool of myself and prove her right? Then you fail, and we come home and life goes on. Easy for you to say, is it? He set his cup down. Miss Bell, this town has been judging me since Marie left, whispering about how I couldn't keep my wife, couldn't manage my ranch, couldn't raise my daughter properly. You think I don't know what it feels like to be the subject of their gossip? Mara looked at him, really looked, saw the tiredness around his eyes, the weight he carried in his shoulders. But you're still here, she said. So are you. He met her gaze. That's the thing about stubborn people. We don't quit just because things get hard. We dig in deeper. Is that what we are? Stubborn? Among other things. He smiled slightly. Get some sleep, Miss Bell. Tomorrow you're going to show them exactly what you're made of. She did sleep eventually, and when morning came, she dressed in her best dress, still worn, still travel-stained, but clean, and loaded her supplies into the wagon. The competition was being held in the church social hall. When they arrived, the room was already full of women, their tables laid out with ingredients and equipment. Mrs. Hutchkins stood at the front, presiding like a queen. Her smile when she saw Mara was razor sharp. Miss Bell, how kind of you to join us. I wasn't sure you'd have the courage. Mrs. Hutchkins, Mara kept her voice level. Thank you for the invitation. Oh, it wasn't an invitation, more of a challenge. Let's see if your cooking matches your confidence. The competition began, and Mara got to work. The social hall smelled like competing perfumes and nervous sweat. 20 women stood at their designated tables, each space marked with a number card and stocked with identical supplies: flour, sugar, butter, eggs, milk. Basic ingredients that could become anything in the right hands or disasters in the wrong ones. Mara's table was number 17, tucked in the back corner near the storage closet. Not an accident, she figured. Mrs. Hutchkins had arranged it so Mara would be as far from the judge's table as possible, easy to overlook. She unpacked her own supplies, the ones she'd brought from the ranch. Her knives, her measuring cups, the vanilla extract she'd been hoarding. Around her, women whispered behind their hands, their eyes tracking her movements like she might pull out something scandalous. Ladies! Mrs. Hutchkins clapped her hands together, the sound sharp in the crowded room. We have 3 hours to create our finest baked goods. The judges will evaluate based on appearance, taste, and creativity. May the best woman win. Her eyes landed on Mara when she said it. The smile that followed was all teeth. You may begin. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Women measuring, mixing, their movements practiced and sure. These were church ladies who'd been baking their whole lives, who knew their recipes by heart, and had blue ribbons to prove it. Mara rolled up her sleeves and started with what she knew best: precision. She measured her flour exactly, sifted it twice to remove any lumps. Creamed butter and sugar until the mixture was pale and fluffy, the sugar crystals completely dissolved. This was the foundation. Everything else built from here. 2 tables over, a woman named Sarah Patterson was making an elaborate layer cake, the kind that required architectural engineering as much as baking skill. On Mara's other side, someone was attempting a pie with a lattice top so intricate it looked like lace. Mara ignored them all. She wasn't competing against them. She was competing against herself, against every doubt, every whisper, every person who told her she didn't belong. Her hands moved through familiar motions. Eggs cracked and separated cleanly. Dry ingredients folded into wet with gentle precision. She was making a simple pound cake, the kind that seemed easy until you tried it. Too much mixing and it turned tough. Too little and it didn't rise properly. The timing had to be perfect. While the cake baked, she started on her second dish, biscuits. But not the simple ones she made for breakfast. These were butter-layered, folded and refolded until they'd rise in delicate, flaky sheets. She worked the dough carefully, keeping everything cold, her movements quick and efficient. Ambitious. Mrs. Hutchkins appeared beside her table like a circling hawk. 2 dishes. Most women struggle with 1. I'm not most women. No, you're certainly not. The older woman's eyes swept across Mara's workspace. Tell me, Miss Bell, do you think cooking skill makes up for moral deficiency? Mara kept her hand steady on the dough. I think cooking skill speaks for itself. Does it? Because I could teach my dog to follow a recipe. What separates a true lady from someone merely competent is character, refinement, the ability to know one's place. My place is in the kitchen, same as yours. Mrs. Hutchkins' smile went brittle. Is that what you tell yourself? That we're the same? No, ma'am. We're very different. I cook because I'm good at it. You cook because you need people to see you doing it. The color drained from Mrs. Hutchkins' face, then flooded back in angry red. How dare you? Ladies, please. One of the judges approached, a thin man with spectacles who looked deeply uncomfortable. This is a friendly competition. Of course. Mrs. Hutchkins smoothed her apron. I was simply welcoming our newest participant. She swept away, her back rigid with fury. The judge gave Mara a nervous look and scurried after her. Elsie appeared at Mara's elbow, her eyes wide. That was amazing. Did you see her face? I shouldn't have said that. Why not? It was true. True doesn't always mean smart. Mara checked her cake through the oven's window, rising properly, the top just starting to brown. Hand me that cooling rack. They worked together in efficient silence, Elsie anticipating what Mara needed before she asked for it. When the cake came out perfectly golden and fragrant, several nearby women stopped to look. Smells good, Sarah Patterson admitted grudgingly. Thank you. Won't be enough to beat my layers, though. I've won this competition 3 years running. Then you've got nothing to worry about. Sarah's smile was uncertain, like she couldn't tell if she was being mocked. She returned to her own table, her movements a touch more frantic than before. The biscuits went into the oven. Mara used the waiting time to make a simple glaze for the cake, powdered sugar, vanilla, just enough milk to thin it. Nothing fancy. Let the cake itself shine through. Across the room, Mrs. Hutchkins was assembling something that looked like a cathedral made of pastry. Intricate, impressive, the kind of showpiece that took years of practice to execute. Women clustered around her table, offering admiring comments that she accepted with practiced humility. She's good, Elsie whispered. She is, Mara agreed, but good doesn't always win. What does? Depends on the judges and the day and 100 other things you can't control. She pulled the biscuits out, their tops golden and their layers visible where they'd split. All you can do is make the best thing you know how to make. When time was called, the tables were laden with an impressive array: cakes, pies, cookies, pastries that looked like they belonged in a bakery window. The judges began their rounds, 3 of them now, all men from town. They tasted, made notes, moved to the next table. Mara stood beside her offerings. The pound cake with its simple glaze. The butter biscuits, still warm, not elaborate, not architectural, just good. The judges reached her table. The thin man with spectacles tried the cake first. His eyebrows rose. This is excellent. Very fine crumb. Thank you. The second judge, a heavy-set man she recognized from the general store, bit into a biscuit, chewed thoughtfully. These are like my grandmother used to make. Haven't had biscuits this good in years. The third judge, an older gentleman with a white beard, sampled both. Simple, he said, but executed perfectly. They made their notes and moved on. Mara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Around her, other women were receiving their assessments. Sarah Patterson's cake was praised for its ambition, but criticized for being slightly dry. Mrs. Hutchkins' pastry cathedral received odd comments about its construction, but nothing about its taste. The judges conferred quietly at their table. The room had gone silent, every woman watching and waiting. Mrs. Hutchkins stood with her hands folded, confident. Sarah Patterson twisted her apron. Mara remained still, her face neutral even though her heart was pounding. Finally, the thin judge stood. We've reached our decision. This was an incredibly difficult choice. Every entry showed remarkable skill. But, someone called out, but one entry stood apart, not for complexity or appearance, but for something more essential, the perfect execution of simple excellence. Mara's hands clenched. The winner is Miss Maribel. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Elsie let out a whoop that echoed off the ceiling. A few scattered claps started, then died when they saw Mrs. Hutchkins's face. The older woman had gone pale. There must be some mistake. No mistake, ma'am? The judge held up his notes. All three of us were unanimous. Miss Bell's entries were technically flawless and, frankly, delicious. But her character, her circumstances, surely that should factor into... We were judging cooking, Mrs. Hutchkins, not character. The thin man's voice was firm. And in that regard, Miss Bell's work was superior. Mrs. Hutchkins looked around the room, seeking support. The other women avoided her eyes. Even Sarah Patterson, who'd lost her 3-year winning streak, was smiling slightly. This is outrageous, Mrs. Hutchkins said. You're rewarding someone who lives in sin, who corrupts young girls, who... Enough! Caleb's voice cut through the room. He'd been standing in the back with the other men who'd come to watch, and now he stepped forward. You challenged Miss Bell to a cooking competition. She won. Accept it with grace or don't, but stop spreading lies about her character. Lies? Mrs. Hutchkins turned on him. Your daughter is living under the same roof as that woman, learning heaven knows what kind of... She's learning to cook, to work hard, to stand up for herself. Caleb's face was hard. She's learning things you never taught her, like kindness, like not tearing people down to make yourself feel important. How dare you speak to me that way? After everything I did for you, taking in your child when your wife, you took her in because it gave you power over me, and now you're angry because I took that power back. The room had gone deathly quiet. Mrs. Hutchkins' mouth worked soundlessly. Come on, Caleb said to Mara and Elsie. Let's go home. They walked out together, Mara's blue ribbon clutched in Elsie's hand. Behind them, the social hall erupted into furious whispers. In the wagon on the way back to the ranch, nobody spoke for the first mile. Then Elsie started laughing, huge gulping laughs that shook her whole body. Did you see her face? When they announced you won, she looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Elsie, Caleb said, but he was smiling. I'm sorry, Pa, but it was perfect. All her scheming and it backfired completely. Mara looked at the ribbon. Blue silk, cheap but official. First place. The proof that her work could speak louder than gossip. She's going to make this worse, she said quietly. Losing to me publicly, she won't forgive that. Let her try. Caleb's hands were loose on the reins. The town saw what happened. They can make their own judgments. But when they got back to the ranch 2 hours later, smoke was visible on the horizon. Black smoke, thick and wrong. Caleb stood up in the wagon. That's coming from the north pasture. Could be a grass fire, Mara said. Wrong season, and it's too concentrated. He snapped the reins, urging the horses faster. Something's burning. As they got closer, the smoke resolved into a structure, or what was left of one. The line shack at the north pasture was engulfed in flames, and 3 figures were stumbling away from it, their clothes smoking. Caleb jumped from the wagon before it fully stopped. Dutch! Frank! The men collapsed in the grass. Their faces were black with soot, their hands blistered. The youngest, Tommy, was coughing so hard he couldn't speak. What happened? Caleb knelt beside them. Stove sick. Dutch managed between coughs. Chimney must have been blocked. Filled up with smoke so fast we couldn't... More coughing. Tommy went back in for the supplies. Damn fool nearly killed himself. Mara was already moving. Elsie, get the medical kit from under the kitchen sink. Caleb, we need water. Clean water. She knelt beside Tommy. His hands were burned badly, the skin already blistering. Can you breathe? He nodded, still coughing. Good. Keep coughing. Get the smoke out. She turned to Dutch. Anyone else inside? No, just us 3. We got the horses out first, then... He broke off coughing again. Elsie ran up with the medical kit. Mara opened it, found the tin of burn salve. This is going to hurt. Already hurts, Tommy gasped. She worked quickly, cleaning the burns as gently as she could and applying salve. Dutch's were less severe, mostly on his forearms. Frank had a deep burn on his shoulder where a burning timber had fallen on him. Caleb returned with water. They gave the men drinks first, then used the rest to cool the burns. "The shack's gone," Frank said, his voice rough. "Everything in it. All the winter supplies we stored there. The blankets, the emergency rations, He stopped. "Everything." Caleb's face was grim. "Can be replaced. Not before winter hits, and not with money we don't have. We'll figure it out." "How?" Frank's eyes were red from smoke. "We're already running lean. Another disaster like this, and I said we'll figure it out." Caleb's voice allowed no argument. "Right now, get these men back to the bunkhouse. Miss Bell, can you—" "I'll take care of them." She was already mentally cataloging what she'd need. "Elsie, run ahead. Get the stove fired up. We'll need hot water for cleaning these wounds properly." The girl took off running. They got the injured men into the bunkhouse. Mara worked through the afternoon, cleaning and rebandaging burns, making poultices for the smoke inhalation, brewing willow bark tea for the pain. Tommy's hands were the worst. He'd be unable to work for weeks. "Stupid," he kept saying. "So stupid going back in there." "You were trying to save the supplies," Dutch said from the next bunk. "A lot of good it did. Couldn't carry half of it out before the roof started coming down." "You're alive. That's what matters." Mara finished wrapping Tommy's hands. "Keep these clean. Change the bandages twice a day. And for the love of everything, don't use these hands for at least a week." "How am I supposed to work?" "You're not. You're supposed to heal." He looked miserable. "Boss can't afford to keep a man who can't pull his weight." "The boss will manage," Caleb spoke from the doorway. "You did good, Tommy. Foolish, but good. Rest up." After the men were settled, Mara and Caleb stood outside the bunkhouse. The sun was setting, painting the smoke-stained sky in shades of red and orange. "That was too close," Caleb said quietly. "If they'd been asleep when it happened, but they weren't this time." He rubbed his face. "I checked that chimney myself 2 months ago. It was clear. Things happen. Not like this. Not all at once." He looked toward the still smoking ruins of the line shack. "First, the town turns against us. Then I lose my daughter's boarding situation. Now this, it feels like bad luck. Like something worse." Mara studied his face. "You think someone did this deliberately?" "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I'm seeing conspiracies where there's just coincidence." He shook his head. "Either way, we're in trouble. Those supplies were meant to last us through winter. Without them, we'll manage." "Will we?" "Miss Bell, I appreciate your optimism, but the numbers don't lie. I'm already stretched thin from the drought last summer. The cattle prices are down. And now I've got to replace everything that burned plus cover Tommy's wages while he can't work." "So what are you saying?" He met her eyes. "I'm saying I might not be able to pay you next month. Or the month after. I'm saying this ranch is hanging by a thread, and that thread just got singed." Mara was quiet for a moment. "Then I'll work for room and board until things improve." "You can't. I can do whatever I need to, same as you." She crossed her arms. "I'm not leaving because things got hard. That's not who I am. Even if it means not getting paid, even then." He studied her face. "Why?" "You could go back to the city, find work that actually pays. Because this is where I choose to be." The words came out firmer than she expected. "Because I'm tired of running every time things get difficult. Because—" She stopped. "Because what?" "Because for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm building something instead of just surviving. And I'm not giving that up." He held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. But if things don't improve, they will." "You sound very sure." "I have to be." That night, Mara made a meal that used up the last of their good supplies. Roasted chicken with herb gravy, potatoes cooked in butter, fresh bread, apple pie for dessert. The men ate quietly, their usual chatter subdued by the day's events. Afterward, Dutch approached her. "Miss Bell? That was the finest meal I've had in my life." "It's just food." "No, ma'am. It's more than that. Today could have ended with us dead. Instead, we're here, fed and cared for and alive. That means something." She didn't know what to say to that, just nodded. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Tommy couldn't work, which meant everyone else had to pick up the slack. Caleb pushed himself hardest of all, out before dawn and not back until after dark. The ranch ran on stubbornness and coffee. Mara stretched the food supplies as far as they would go, made soups from bones she would have thrown away before, turned stale bread into pudding, used every scrap, wasted nothing. Elsie helped without complaint, learning to make miracles from scraps. "How do you do it?" the girl asked one afternoon while they were making dumplings from the dregs of the flour barrel. "Do what?" "Stay calm." Pa's worried, the men are worried, but you just keep working like everything's fine. Everything is fine. We're fed, we're sheltered, we're together. The rest is just details. Those details might cost us the ranch. Mara looked at her. Then we'll deal with that if it happens. But until it does, we keep working. That's all we can control. The weather turned colder. October slid into November with frost that killed the last of the garden and winds that cut through clothing like knives. The men needed more food to stay warm, but supplies were running desperately low. Then the storm hit. It came down from the north on a Thursday evening, the temperature dropping 20 degrees in an hour. Snow started falling thick and fast, driven by winds that turned it into a horizontal wall of white. Caleb and 4 of the men were still out checking the fence line. They'd left that morning expecting to be back by noon. It was now past dark and they hadn't returned. Mara stood at the kitchen window, staring into the storm. Beside her, Elsie was crying quietly. They should be back by now. The storm probably slowed them down. Or they're lost, or hurt, or stop. Mara turned to face her. Your father knows this land. He'll find his way back. What if he doesn't? Then we'll go find him. Dutch appeared in the doorway, snow-covered. Any sign? Nothing. We need to organize a search party. In this? Mara gestured at the window. You'd be lost in 5 minutes. We can't just wait here while they freeze to death. We're not. We're preparing. She moved to the stove. Get every blanket we have. Set up the main room with bedding near the fireplace. When they get back, they're going to be half frozen. We need to be ready. Dutch nodded and disappeared. Mara started heating water, gathering supplies. Elsie stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen. Elsie, I need you. The girl blinked. What? Get the medical kit, then find all the dry clothes we have. Men's sizes. They'll need to change immediately when they get here. You really think they'll make it back? I know they will. Now move. Elsie moved. They worked through the next 2 hours in focused silence, preparing for every possibility. Beds made, water heated, food ready, the fireplace roaring, everything ready for men who might not make it home. At midnight, Dutch burst through the door. I see lights! Coming from the north! They all rushed outside into the storm. Sure enough, shapes were emerging from the white darkness. Horses, men, moving slowly but deliberately toward the ranch. Caleb led them, his face encrusted with ice. Behind him, the other men swayed in their saddles. Inside, Mara commanded. All of you, now! They stumbled into the house. She directed them to the fireplace, started stripping off frozen outer layers. Their hands were white with frostbite, their lips blue. One of them, Frank, was barely conscious. What happened? She asked while she worked. Got turned around in the storm, Caleb managed through chattering teeth. Couldn't see 10 feet. Finally found a rock outcropping. Waited it out until we could see enough to navigate. Frank? Fell through some ice crossing a stream. Took us 20 minutes to pull him out. Mara looked at the man. His color was bad. His breathing shallow. Get him by the fire. Strip him completely. We need to warm him gradually. They worked together. Her, Elsie, Dutch. The other uninjured men. Blankets, heated stones wrapped in cloth. Warm drinks forced between chattering teeth. Frank was the worst, drifting in and out of consciousness. Stay with me, Mara said, slapping his face lightly. You don't get to quit now. His eyes fluttered open. Cold. I know, we're fixing that. Stay awake. She kept him talking, kept him focused, while his body slowly came back to life. The others recovered faster, their younger bodies more resilient. But Frank was older, his system slower to respond. Come on, she muttered, checking his pulse. Come on, you stubborn old man. His breathing suddenly hitched, then evened out. Color started returning to his face. That's it. There you go. By 3 in the morning, all 5 men were stable, sleeping or resting, wrapped in blankets, alive. The storm still raged outside, but inside the house was warm and safe. Mara sat down heavily in a kitchen chair. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. Elsie appeared with coffee. "Drink this." "You should be sleeping." "So should you." The girl sat down across from her. "You saved them. All of them." "I just did what needed doing." "Pa says that too. But it's more than that." Elsie's eyes were red from crying and lack of sleep. "You knew exactly what to do, how to help them." "Anyone could have." "No, they couldn't. I was here. I saw the others panicking, but you stayed calm, gave orders, made everyone else calm too." She wrapped her hands around her own coffee cup. "That's not nothing." Mara didn't know how to respond to that. She drank her coffee in silence. Caleb found her there an hour later, still sitting at the kitchen table. He'd changed into dry clothes, his hair still damp. "You should rest." "So should you." He poured himself coffee and sat down. "Frank's awake, asking for food." "That's a good sign." "Miss Bell." "Mara." He stopped, started again. "What you did tonight. I don't have words for it." "You don't need words." "I do, though. Because without you, I'd have lost men tonight. Maybe all of them. You kept your head when everyone else was losing theirs. You knew exactly what to do. I worked railroad camps, remember? Saw my share of frostbite and hypothermia. It's more than experience, it's..." He rubbed his face. "You're the backbone of this place. You know that, right? Not just the cooking. Everything. The way you handle Elsie, the way the men respect you, the way you can face down Mrs. Hutchkins or a medical emergency with the same calm competence. Caleb, I'm not proposing again. I need you to know what you mean to this ranch, to me." She met his eyes across the table, saw exhaustion there, and gratitude, and something else she couldn't quite name. "This is where I belong," she said quietly. "I figured that out a while ago. Even with everything, the town, the gossip, the disasters, especially with everything, because none of it has broken me, hasn't even bent me. And that means something." He smiled, tired but genuine. "You're the stubbornest woman I've ever met. Takes one to know one." They sat there as dawn started breaking outside the windows, the storm finally easing. Around them, the house was full of sleeping men, all of them alive because of her actions. Mara thought about the journey that had brought her here. The long stage ride, the public refusal, the town's judgment, the cooking competition, tonight's crisis. Each moment a test she'd pass, not by being perfect, but by refusing to break. The woman who'd arrived in Coldwater 6 weeks ago wouldn't recognize herself now. That woman had been running, desperate, clinging to the last of her money and her pride. This woman had found something worth fighting for, and she wasn't done fighting yet. News of the storm rescue spread through Coldwater faster than the blizzard itself had moved. By the time Caleb made the supply run 3 days later, half the town already knew that Mara Bell had saved 5 men from freezing to death. He came back with more than supplies. He came back with questions. "Miller asked if you had medical training," he said, unloading flour sacks in the kitchen. "Said his wife's been having trouble with her breathing and the doctor's 2 towns over." Mara paused mid-inventory. "I'm not a doctor." Told him that. He said he didn't care. Said anyone who could bring Frank back from the edge of death probably knew more than most. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd ask you." He set down the last sack. "There's more. Patterson wants to know if you'd be willing to teach his daughters to cook, offering to pay. And the minister, the actual minister, not Mrs. Hutchkins, asked if you'd consider helping with the church social next month. They spent 2 months calling me immoral. Now they want my help? People have short memories when they need something." He leaned against the counter. "You don't have to say yes to any of it." Mara looked out the window at the ranch yard. The men were working on reinforcing the barn roof, their voices carrying across the cold air. Elsie was in the henhouse collecting eggs, her breath making clouds in the morning chill. "Tell Miller I'll look at his wife. No promises, but I'll see what I can do." "And the others?" "I'll think about it." What she was really thinking about was the blue ribbon still tucked in her dresser drawer and the memory of Mrs. Hutchkins' face when she'd lost. The town could ask for help, but that didn't mean they'd changed their minds about who Mara was. It just meant they needed her more than they hated her. For now, that would have to be enough. Mrs. Miller's breathing trouble turned out to be relatively simple, a chest cold that had settled deep because she'd kept working through it instead of resting. Mara made her a tincture of horehound and honey, showed Mr. Miller how to prepare steam treatments, and told the woman firmly that she needed to actually stay in bed for 3 days. 3 days? Mrs. Miller looked horrified. I can't possibly. You can. Your husband can manage the store. Your children can manage themselves. And if you don't rest now, this will turn into pneumonia, and you'll be in bed for 3 weeks instead of 3 days. The woman had stared at her, then slowly nodded. Word spread again. The woman who'd saved the ranch hands, who'd cured Mrs. Miller, who could cook better than anyone in 3 counties. The whispers changed shape, became less vicious and more curious. But Mrs. Hutchkins wasn't giving up that easily. Mara found out about the church social sabotage from Elsie, who'd heard it from one of the Patterson girls in town. She's been telling people you're going to poison the food, Elsie said, her face flushed with anger. Says you'll use the social to get revenge for how the town treated you. That's ridiculous. I know that. But some people are listening to her. They're saying maybe the church should find someone else to help with the cooking. Caleb, who'd been listening from the doorway, spoke up. Let them find someone else then. No. Mara set down the bread dough she'd been kneading. That's exactly what she wants. For me to back down, prove I was never reliable in the first place. So what are you going to do? I'm going to cook for their social, and it's going to be so good they'll forget every lie she's ever told about me. The church social was planned for mid-December, a month away. Mara spent that time carefully rebuilding the ranch's supplies and her own reputation. She helped 3 more families with various ailments. Nothing serious, just the practical knowledge she'd picked up working camps where doctors were scarce. She started teaching the Patterson girls twice a week, showing them techniques their mother had never learned. And she planned her menu for the social with the precision of a general planning a campaign. Roasted chicken, she told Elsie, who was taking notes. Glazed ham, 3 kinds of potatoes, winter vegetables roasted with herbs, fresh rolls. And for dessert, she paused. I'm thinking a spice cake, something that smells like Christmas and tastes like someone's best memory of home. That's a lot of food. It's a social for the whole town. It needs to be impressive. What if she tries to sabotage it again, like at the competition? Mara had been thinking about that. Then we make sure there's no opportunity. We prepare everything at the ranch, transport it hot, and I don't let it out of my sight until it's served. Elsie grinned. You've really thought this through. I've learned not to underestimate small-minded people with big grudges. The morning of the social, Mara woke at 3 to start preparations. The kitchen became a battlefield of organized chaos, pots steaming, ovens going, the whole house filling with smells that made even the sleepy ranch hands wander in to investigate. Save some for tonight, Dutch warned, eyeing the glazed ham. This isn't for you. Seems a shame to waste it on town folks who've been nothing but trouble. It's not wasted if it changes their minds. He snorted. You really think food's going to make them forget 2 months of gossip? No, but it might make them reconsider whether the gossip was worth it. By noon, everything was ready. They loaded it all into the wagon, covered dishes, wrapped bundles, everything still hot and perfect. Caleb drove while Mara sat in back, guarding the food like treasure. The church social hall was already filling when they arrived. People stopped talking when Mara walked in carrying the first dish. She ignored them, focused on setting up the serving table exactly how she wanted it. Mrs. Hutchkins appeared like a summoned demon. Miss Bell, how kind of you to actually show up. Mrs. Hutchkins. Mara set down a pot of roasted vegetables. The minister asked for my help. I said yes. And I'm sure your food is... The woman paused, searching for something cutting to say, but the smells filling the hall made it difficult. Adequate. It's better than adequate, but you'll have to taste it yourself to know for sure. I don't think... Sarah Patterson tried the chicken earlier. She's the one who won 3 years running before me, remember? She said it was the best she'd ever had. Mara met Mrs. Hutchkins' eyes directly. But I understand if you'd rather not try it. Some people prefer being right to being honest. The older woman's face went red. You have a lot of nerve speaking to me that way. I have just enough nerve to stand up for myself, which apparently makes me scandalous. People were gathering now, drawn by the confrontation and the food smells. Mara could see the minister making his way through the crowd, his face anxious. Mrs. Hutchins drew herself up. This food could be tainted, poisoned. You have no training, no certification. Neither do you. But you've been cooking for church socials for 20 years. Mara picked up a fork, speared a piece of chicken from the serving platter, and ate it. There. Not poisoned. Anyone else concerned is welcome to watch me eat from every dish. That proves nothing. Then what would prove something? What exactly are you accusing me of, Mrs. Hutchins? Making good food? Teaching your neighbor's daughters? Saving 5 men from freezing to death? Her voice had risen now, carrying across the silent hall. Or is your real problem that I wouldn't let you control me? That I came to this town and refused to bow to your idea of what a woman should be? You refused a decent proposal to live in sin. I refused to marry a stranger to satisfy your sense of propriety. And I work for my living, same as every man in this town. If that makes me immoral in your eyes, then I'm happy to be immoral. The minister finally reached them. Ladies, please. This is supposed to be a celebration. It is a celebration, Mara said, not breaking eye contact with Mrs. Hutchins. Of community, of coming together, of putting aside petty differences for one evening. Unless, of course, certain people would rather cling to their grudges than admit they might have been wrong. Mrs. Hutchins opened her mouth, closed it, looked around at the crowd watching them. For the first time since Mara had met her, the woman looked uncertain. The food does smell good, someone said from the crowd. Sarah Patterson, of all people. And I did try the chicken earlier. It was exceptional. Well, I'm hungry, another voice called. Mr. Miller. And I trust Miss Bell. She helped my wife when nobody else would. People started moving toward the serving table. Slowly at first, then faster. Mrs. Hutchins found herself pushed aside by the crowd, her protest dying in the rush for food. Mara served with efficient grace, making sure everyone got generous portions. She watched them eat, saw the surprise on face after face as they tasted food that exceeded every expectation. This is incredible, someone said. Better than the Harvest Social last year. Best ham I've ever had. The compliments built on each other. People who'd crossed the street to avoid Mara last week were now asking for seconds, thanking her, smiling. Mrs. Hutchins stood alone near the wall, her face a mask of controlled fury. She'd lost, and she knew it. Not because Mara had beaten her in an argument, but because the food spoke louder than any words could. Later, when the plates were cleared and people were lingering over coffee, the minister approached Mara. Miss Bell, I wanted to apologize for the way this town has treated you. You weren't the one spreading gossip. No, but I didn't stop it either. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere in private matters, but when that silence allows harm, he shook his head. I should have spoken up sooner. You're speaking up now. Too late to prevent damage. Maybe, but not too late to help repair it. She looked around the hall. I'm not asking for everyone to love me, just to judge me by what I do, not what they imagine I am. That seems fair. He moved away and Caleb appeared with Elsie. That was something, he said. That was necessary. You made Mrs. Hutchins look like a fool. No, she did that herself. I just gave her enough rope. Mara started packing up the empty serving dishes. But it's not over. She's not the type to forgive being publicly embarrassed. Let her stay embarrassed. The town saw what happened, saw who you really are. Did they? Or did they just see someone who can cook well? She paused. There's a difference between respecting my skills and respecting me as a person. Elsie touched her arm. They're starting to see both, I can tell. Maybe the girl was right. Over the next few weeks, the change was subtle but real. People nodded to Mara in the street instead of looking away. Miller started keeping aside the best cuts of meat when she came to shop. The Patterson girls asked if they could come to the ranch to learn instead of meeting in town. Their mother's idea, wanting them to see what hard work and independence looked like. But Mrs. Hutchins wasn't done yet. The trouble came the week before Christmas. Mara was in town picking up supplies when she overheard 2 women talking outside the general store. Found out this morning, Mrs. Hutchins has been writing letters. Letters to who? The territorial governor's office claims there's an unmarried woman living inappropriately with men and a minor child. Says it's a moral issue that needs official intervention. Mara's hands tightened on her shopping basket. Do you think anything will come of it? Who knows? But if someone official comes to investigate, Mara didn't wait to hear more. She finished her shopping quickly and drove back to the ranch, her mind racing. Caleb was in the barn when she found him. She told him everything she'd heard. His face went dark. She's trying to get the territorial authorities involved. Can she do that? If she makes enough noise? Maybe. They could decide Elsie needs to be in a more appropriate situation. Could force her back to town, or worse, send her to an orphanage if they decide I'm unfit. You're not unfit. I'm a widower raising a daughter with the help of an unmarried woman. In some people's eyes, that's exactly unfit. He paced the length of the barn. If they take Elsie, they won't. You don't know that? Then we make sure they don't have grounds to. Mara's mind was working fast. What would make this situation acceptable to them? Me being married, a proper family structure, the appearance of respectability. He stopped pacing. Which brings us back to where we started 2 months ago. They looked at each other. I'm not proposing again, he said. I made that mistake once. It wasn't a mistake, it was premature. She set down her basket. But circumstances are different now. Are they? You know me now, I know you. This wouldn't be a stranger offering charity. It would be... She paused. A practical arrangement between people who respect each other. That's not a reason to get married. It's better than most reasons. How many marriages start with respect, with actual knowledge of who the other person is? She moved closer. I don't need romance, Caleb. I need security. A place that's legally mine. And you need someone who can help protect Elsie from people like Mrs. Hutchkins. This is insane. This is practical. What about what you said in town? About refusing to trade your name for respectability? I'm not trading. I'm choosing. There's a difference. She held his gaze. I choose to stay here. I choose to help protect your daughter. And if that means giving the territorial authorities the respectability they need to leave us alone, then I choose that too. He was quiet for a long time. You're sure? Are you? I don't know. This feels like we're letting her win, giving her exactly what she wanted in the first place. No. When you proposed before, it would have been surrender. Now it's strategy. Mara smiled slightly. Besides, nothing will infuriate Mrs. Hutchkins more than seeing us happily married while she takes credit for forcing it. Happily? Well, contentedly, with mutual respect and separate bedrooms. His laugh was surprised and genuine. When did you become so calculating? I've always been calculating. I'm just better at hiding it now. She picked up her basket again. Think about it. Talk to Elsie. If you both agree, I'm willing. If not, we'll find another way. She left him in the barn and went back to the kitchen. Her hands were shaking slightly as she unpacked the supplies. This wasn't how she'd imagined her life going. Proposing marriage, or accepting a proposal she'd refused months ago, to a man she respected but didn't love. But love seemed like a luxury compared to survival. And survival required making hard choices. Elsie found her an hour later. Pa told me. And? Are you doing this for me? Because if you are, I'm doing this for all of us, including myself. Mara set down the potatoes she'd been peeling. Elsie, I like it here. I like the work. I like teaching you. I like feeling like what I do matters. And I'm not going to let some bitter woman destroy that because she can't accept being wrong. But marriage it's permanent. So is running away, and I'm tired of running. She looked at the girl. I need you to be honest with me. Would having me as a stepmother be terrible? Elsie's eyes filled with tears. No, it would be... I'd like that. A lot. Even though I'm not your real mother? My real mother left. You stayed. The girl wiped her eyes. That makes you more real than she ever was. They hugged in the kitchen, surrounded by half-peeled potatoes and the smell of bread rising. That evening, Caleb came to find Mara in her room. She was mending one of Elsie's dresses, her stitches small and precise. I talked to the minister, he said from the doorway. He can marry us Saturday if we want. That's fast. Mrs. Hutchkins' letter is already sent. Better to have the marriage be fact before any investigators arrive. Practical. Seemed to be our theme. He leaned against the doorframe. Are we really doing this? Unless you've changed your mind. Have you? No. Then I guess we're getting married. He shook his head. This is the strangest courtship I've ever heard of. This isn't a courtship, it's a merger. She tied off her thread. But it's a good one. We both get what we need. And what do you need, Mara? Really? She considered the question. A place to belong. Work that matters. People who see me as something more than a problem to be solved. You have all that already. Not legally, not in a way that can't be taken away. She met his eyes. Marriage makes it permanent, makes me family instead of hired help. That's worth more than romance. He nodded slowly. Saturday, then. Saturday. The wedding was small. Just the ranch hands, Elsie, and the minister in the ranch house parlor. Mara wore her best dress. Still worn, still travel-stained in places she couldn't quite clean out. Caleb wore a suit that smelled of mothballs and looked like it had last been worn at his first wedding. The minister spoke about partnership and commitment, about building a life together through hard work and mutual respect. It was a practical ceremony for a practical marriage. When it came time for the vows, Mara spoke clearly. I promise to be a partner to you, a mother to Elsie, and to work beside you in building this ranch into something lasting. Caleb's vows were similar. I promise to respect your work, value your judgment, and give you the security and place you deserve. No mention of love, no poetry, just honest promises they both intended to keep. The ring Caleb slipped on her finger had belonged to his grandmother. Simple gold, worn smooth by years of wear. It fit perfectly. When the minister said they could kiss, they exchanged a brief, awkward peck that made Elsie giggle and the ranch hands applaud. Just like that, Mara Bell became Mara Ward. The news reached town within hours. By the next morning, when Caleb went to town to file the marriage certificate, half of Coldwater knew. Miller congratulated him. The Pattersons sent a gift. Even people who'd been coldly neutral offered tentative well wishes. Mrs. Hutchkins, according to reports, had locked herself in her room and refused to come out. She's furious, Sarah Patterson told Mara a few days later when she brought her daughters for their cooking lesson. Absolutely furious. She keeps saying you trapped Caleb, that this is all part of some scheme. Let her say it. Doesn't it bother you? Not anymore. And it was true. Mara had stopped caring what Mrs. Hutchkins thought the moment she'd said her vows. That woman's opinion couldn't touch her now, couldn't threaten her place here. I think, Sarah hesitated, I think I owe you an apology for how I acted when you first arrived. I believed the gossip instead of making my own judgment. Most people did. That doesn't make it right. The woman twisted her gloves. You've been nothing but kind to my daughters, patient with their questions. And the way you handled the social, standing up to Mrs. Hutchkins, I'd never have had the courage. You might, if you needed to. I hope I never need to find out. She smiled slightly, but I'm glad you did. After Sarah and her daughters left, Mara stood in the kitchen that was now legally hers, the room where she'd proven herself day after day, meal after meal, the heart of a home that had become more than just a workplace. Through the window, she could see Caleb working with the horses, his movements efficient and sure. Elsie was in the henhouse singing to herself while she collected eggs. The ranch hands were mending fence in the south pasture, their voices carrying on the winter wind. This was her life now. Not perfect, not romantic, but real and solid and hers in a way nothing had ever been before. That night at dinner, Dutch raised his coffee cup. To Mrs. Ward, best cook in Montana and stubborn enough to prove it. The other men raised their cups too. To Mrs. Ward, Mara felt her throat tighten. Just doing my job. More than that, ma'am, Tommy said, his burned hands now healed enough to work again. You turned this place around. Made it feel like home instead of just a bunkhouse. We all did that. Together. Maybe, Caleb said from the head of the table, but you made it possible. After the meal, after the dishes were done and the men had returned to the bunkhouse, Mara stood on the porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The air was cold enough to burn her lungs, but she didn't go inside. She heard footsteps behind her. Caleb joined her at the railing. Regrets? He asked. None. You? Not a single one. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the horizon fade from blue to black. This is going to work, isn't it? Mara said. This strange arrangement of ours. It already is working. Good. She pulled her shawl tighter. Because I'm not going anywhere. Wouldn't expect you to. You're too stubborn. Takes one to know one. He laughed, and the sound carried across the quiet ranch, warm despite the cold. Whatever came next, territorial investigators, Mrs. Hutchkins' continued fury, the hard work of making it through winter. They'd face it together. Not as romantic partners, but as something potentially stronger. Partners in the truest sense. Building something that would last. The territorial investigator arrived on a Tuesday morning in late January, his official documents crisp despite the 2-day journey from Helena. His name was Edmund Garrett, and he had the tired eyes of a man who'd seen too many messy situations and expected this to be another one. Mara watched from the kitchen window as he dismounted in the ranch yard, brushing road dust from his coat. Caleb was already walking out to meet him, his posture relaxed but ready.
Mrs. Ward. Elsie appeared at her elbow, her face pale. What if he doesn't believe we're a real family? Then we'll show him we are. Mara untied her apron. Go wash your face and put on your good dress. We're going to be exactly who we are. No performance, no pretending. What if that's not good enough? It will be.
But Mara's hands were shaking slightly as she smoothed her skirt. Everything they'd built over the past 3 months could unravel in the next few hours if this man decided their arrangement wasn't acceptable. If he determined that Elsie needed to be removed from the ranch, placed somewhere more appropriate. She stepped out onto the porch as Caleb and Mr. Garrett approached the house. Mr. Garrett, this is my wife, Mara. Caleb's introduction was smooth, natural, like they'd been married for years instead of weeks. Mrs. Ward, Garrett tipped his hat. His gaze was assessing, taking in her worn dress, her work-roughened hands, the confidence in the way she stood. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. Of course. Would you like coffee? I just made a fresh pot. That would be welcome, thank you. Inside, Mara poured coffee while the men settled at the kitchen table. She could feel Garrett's eyes tracking the room, the clean surfaces, the organized pantry visible through the open door, the smell of bread baking in the oven. You have a well-run kitchen, Mrs. Ward. I'm a cook by trade. Well-run is the only kind I know. She set coffee in front of him. What exactly brings you all the way from Helena? Garrett pulled out a folder. I received correspondence expressing concerns about a minor child living in what was described as an improper household situation. My job is to investigate such claims and ensure the child's welfare. Who sent the correspondence? Caleb's voice was level. The complaints are filed anonymously, but they included specific details. Claims that your daughter was residing with an unmarried woman of questionable character without proper female supervision or moral guidance. Those claims would have been true 2 months ago, Mara said, before Caleb and I married. Now they're just vindictive gossip from someone who doesn't like being proven wrong. Garrett's eyebrows rose slightly. Proven wrong about what? About me. About whether I belonged here. She sat down across from him. Mr. Garrett, I came to this town with nothing but a carpet bag and a job offer. I refused a proposal because I wanted to work, not be rescued. That made me scandalous. The person who wrote those letters has been trying to drive me out since the day I arrived. Mrs. Hutchkins, Caleb added. She runs the boarding house in town, had control over Elsie until we brought her home full time. And you married to legitimize the arrangement? We married because it made sense. Mara met his gaze directly. Because we respect each other and wanted to build a stable home for Elsie. Is that less valid than marrying for romance that fades in a year? Garrett was quiet for a moment, studying them both. Where is the child now? Getting dressed. She'll be down shortly. Caleb's hand rested on the table near Mara's. Not touching, but close. A small gesture of unity. You're welcome to speak with her privately. Ask her anything you want. I intend to. Elsie came down a few minutes later, her good dress buttoned to the collar, her hair neatly braided. She looked young and nervous, but she met Garrett's eyes when Caleb introduced them. Miss Ward, I'd like to ask you some questions if that's all right. Would you prefer to speak with me alone? Elsie glanced at Mara and Caleb. I don't mind if they stay. Very well. Garrett opened his notebook. How long have you been living at this ranch? Since November. Before that, I stayed with Mrs. Hutchkins in town during the week. And why did you leave Mrs. Hutchkins' care? Because I wasn't happy there. She was mean, not in big ways, but in small ones, always telling me I was clumsy or stupid or wasting her time, always making me feel like I should be grateful she put up with me. And here? Are you happy here? Elsie's whole face changed. Yes, very happy. Mara teaches me things, cooking, managing a household, standing up for myself. Pa teaches me about the ranch. I'm learning skills instead of just being in the way. Mara? Garrett glanced at Mara. Not mother? She told me I could call her whatever felt right. Mara feels right. She's not trying to replace my real mother. She's just being herself. And what about the ranch hands, living in close proximity to working men? Does that concern you? Why would it? They're respectful. Dutch brings me eggs from the hen house. Tommy taught me to whittle. Frank tells stories about his cowboy days. They treat me like a little sister. Garrett made notes. You understand why I'm asking these questions. My job is to make sure you're safe and properly cared for. I understand, but if you're here because of Mrs. Hutchkins' letters, you should know she's lying. She's been lying about Mara since the beginning because Mara wouldn't bow down to her. Elsie's voice was steady, stronger than Mara had ever heard it. This is the first time in 4 years I've felt like I actually have a home. Please don't take that away. The room went quiet. Garrett set down his pen and looked at the three of them. Caleb's protective posture, Mara's calm composure, Elsie's fierce certainty. I'd like to see the rest of the house, if you don't mind, and speak with the ranch hands. They showed him everything. Elsie's room, clean and personal, with books on the shelf and drawings pinned to the wall. The separate bedrooms Mara and Caleb occupied. The orderly kitchen, the well-stocked pantry, the evidence of a household that functioned through cooperation rather than chaos. The ranch hands were even more direct than Elsie had been. Best thing that ever happened to this place was Mrs. Ward arriving, Dutch told Garrett. We were half starving before she came. Now we're fed proper, the house runs smooth, and the boss isn't killing himself trying to manage everything alone. And the girl? Miss Ward? Elsie? Dutch smiled. That kid's thriving. You should have seen her when she lived with Mrs. Hutchkins. Always nervous, always apologizing for existing. Now she walks around here like she owns the place. In the best way. Frank was more blunt. You take that girl away from here and put her back with that bitter old woman, you'd be doing real harm. This is where she belongs. Garrett spent the rest of the day observing, watching Mara prepare lunch, seeing how she and Elsie worked together in easy rhythm, noting the casual warmth between Caleb and his daughter. By evening, when Mara served dinner for everyone including the investigator, the tension had shifted. This is remarkable, Mrs. Ward, Garrett said, savoring the pot roast. Truly exceptional. Thank you. You said you were a cook by trade. Where did you train? Railroad camps, mostly. Mining operations. Anywhere that needed to feed large crews efficiently. You learn fast when 50 hungry men are counting on you. And you gave that up to come here? I didn't give it up. I applied it differently. She gestured around the table. Same skills, smaller scale, better results. After dinner, Garrett asked to speak with Caleb and Mara privately. They sat in the parlor, the room lit by oil lamps that cast long shadows. I'll be direct, Garrett said. When I arrived this morning, I expected to find exactly what Mrs. Hutchkins described, an inappropriate situation masquerading as respectability. What I found instead is a functional family that happens not to fit conventional patterns. Does that mean, Caleb started, it means I'll be filing a report that finds no cause for concern. Elsie is well cared for, properly housed, and receiving appropriate guidance. The marriage appears stable and the household well managed. There's no grounds for intervention. Mara felt something unknot in her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm just reporting what I observed. He stood gathering his papers. Though I will say, Mrs. Ward, you've built something impressive here. Not just the cooking or the household management, but the way you've created stability out of what could have been chaos. That takes remarkable strength. Or remarkable stubbornness. His smile was genuine. In my experience, they're often the same thing. He left the next morning. By the time his report reached Helena 2 weeks later, confirming that Elsie Ward was in a safe and appropriate home, the news had already spread through Coldwater in a different form. Mrs. Hutchkins had lost. Not just lost the specific battle over Elsie, but lost her grip on the town's moral authority. People had watched her spend months attacking Mara, watched her predictions of disaster fail to materialize, watched her complaints be officially dismissed, and they'd started questioning what else she might be wrong about. The shift was subtle at first. Women who'd avoided Mara started offering cautious greetings. Men tipped their hats. The general store began stocking special orders she requested without requiring payment up front. Then Sarah Patterson came to the ranch with a proposal. "I've been thinking," she said, sitting in Mara's kitchen with coffee and the last of the morning biscuits, "about what you did for my daughters, how they've improved under your teaching. And I thought, what if we made it official?" Official how? A proper cooking school, here at the ranch. You could teach girls from town, charge a fee, give them real skills they could use. Sarah leaned forward. There's demand for it. I've had 3 mothers ask me where my daughters learned to make proper bread. And it's not just cooking, it's the confidence you give them, the sense that they can do hard things. Mara turned the idea over in her mind. That would mean more people coming to the ranch, more involvement with town. Is that a problem? It might be for some people. Let them be bothered. You've proven yourself 10 times over. And honestly, the mothers asking about lessons are the ones who've been watching their daughters come home excited about learning. That matters more than old grudges. What would you charge? We'd figure that out together. Maybe I could help manage the business side? I'm good with accounts, and you're good with teaching. Sarah smiled. Partnership, like your marriage, practical and mutually beneficial. Mara laughed despite herself. You've heard about that? Everyone's heard about that. The practical marriage that works better than half the romantic ones in town. She sobered. I mean it, though. This could be good for everyone, for you, for the girls who need skills, for the town. Let me talk to Caleb. And Elsie. This affects all of us. That evening, she presented the idea at dinner. The ranch hands listened with interest. Would mean more traffic through here, Dutch observed. More people seeing how we operate. Could be good for business, Frank added. Town folks see a well-run ranch, might be more willing to do trade with us. Caleb was quiet, thinking. It's a big step, opening up the ranch like that. I know, but it's also an opportunity to build something bigger than just getting by. What do you think, Elsie? Caleb looked at his daughter. I think Mara should do it. She's an amazing teacher, and I could help. Assist with the younger girls, maybe. You're sure you wouldn't mind sharing her time? Pa, I'm not 5. I don't need constant attention. And watching her teach other girls, it makes me proud. Like, that's my stepmother. She's doing something important. Mara felt her throat tighten. When did you get so grown up? Someone taught me how. Elsie grinned. So are we doing this? They did it. The Ward Ranch Cooking School started small. 3 students on Saturday mornings, using the ranch kitchen during hours when it wasn't needed for regular meals. Mara taught basic skills first: bread, simple pastries, how to manage a kitchen efficiently. Sarah handled the accounts and scheduling. Word spread. By March, they had 8 regular students. By April, 12. Girls from town and surrounding ranches, ages 10 to 16, learning skills their mothers couldn't or wouldn't teach them. Why don't you teach them? One girl asked her mother during pickup. Because I learned from my mother, who learned from hers. And somewhere along the way, we started doing things by rote instead of understanding. Mrs. Ward actually explains why things work. The money wasn't much at first, but it added up. Enough to replace some of the supplies lost in the fire. Enough to start a small savings account at the bank in town. Enough to prove that Mara's skills had value beyond just feeding ranch hands. But the real change came from something else entirely. One of the students was a girl named Martha, 14 years old and painfully shy. She barely spoke for her first 3 lessons, just watched and followed instructions with desperate concentration. During the 4th lesson, while teaching pie crust, Mara noticed Martha's hands were shaking. You all right? She asked quietly, away from the other girls. I need to get this right. My ma says if I can't learn to cook proper, I'll never find a husband. And if I don't find a husband, I'll end up alone and worthless like... She stopped, face flushing. Like me? Mara kept her voice gentle. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... It's what your mother said. I understand. She guided Martha's hands through folding the dough. But your mother's wrong about something important. Cooking isn't about finding a husband. It's about being able to feed yourself, take care of yourself, not need anyone else to survive. But everyone says women need... Everyone says a lot of things. Most of it's nonsense designed to keep us small and scared. Mara met the girl's eyes. You know what I've learned? The most valuable thing isn't being marriageable. It's being capable. When you can do hard things well, you have choices, and choices are worth more than any husband. Martha stared at her. But you're married. I am. By choice, not necessity. Because I wanted to, not because I had to. That's the difference. She squeezed Martha's shoulder. Learn to cook because it's useful and empowering, not because you need to please some future man who may or may not exist. The girl's eyes filled with tears. No one's ever said that to me before. Then they should have. Word of that conversation spread too, in a different way. Mothers who'd sent their daughters to learn domestic skills suddenly found their daughters coming home with questions, challenging assumptions, asking why they had to marry instead of work, why cooking for a husband was noble, but cooking for wages wasn't. It made some people uncomfortable, made others think. Mrs. Hutchkins, predictably, called it corrupting. She's filling their heads with radical ideas, Mara heard she'd said at the ladies' auxiliary meeting. Teaching them to value work over family. It's disgraceful. But the mothers who'd watched their daughters gain confidence, learn skills, start believing in their own capabilities, they saw something different. My daughter stands up straighter now, one mother told Mara. Speaks up more. I didn't realize how small she'd been making herself until she stopped doing it. The cooking school became more than just lessons. It became a place where girls learned they could take up space, make noise, have opinions, be more than decorative or useful in prescribed ways. And Mara, who'd spent her whole life fighting for the right to work, to choose, to be valued for her skills rather than her compliance, was teaching the next generation that the fight was worth it. By summer, the ranch was thriving in ways nobody had expected. The cooking school was profitable. Caleb's cattle prices had improved with a better market. The hands were well-fed and loyal, several of them turning down offers from larger ranches to stay at Bar W. You know what the difference is? Dutch said one evening, sitting on the porch after dinner. This place feels permanent, like we're building something that'll last instead of just surviving season to season. That's because we are, Caleb said. He was sitting with Mara, the two of them in the comfortable silence that had become their normal. Not romantic, but solid, reliable. All because you hired the right cook, Dutch grinned. Best business decision you ever made, boss. The best decision, Caleb corrected, was getting out of her way and letting her do what she does best. Mara smiled. Which is what, exactly? Make impossible things work through sheer, stubborn competence. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. In August, the town held its annual harvest festival. Mara had been asked to judge the cooking competition, the same competition she'd won 9 months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Mrs. Hutchkins didn't enter. She attended, standing stiffly near the edge of the crowd, but she didn't participate. When Mara was introduced as the judge, their eyes met across the social hall. Mara nodded once. Not friendship, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. You tried to break me and failed. We both know it. Mrs. Hutchkins looked away first. The entries were good that year. Sarah Patterson had clearly been practicing, her cake a masterpiece of technique. A newcomer to town, a young woman named Rebecca, showed remarkable talent with pastry. Mara judged fairly, praised honestly, and awarded prizes based purely on merit. When she announced Rebecca as the winner, the girl burst into tears. I can't believe, I never thought... You earned it, Mara told her. That's worth more than being given it. Afterward, Rebecca approached her privately. Mrs. Ward, I heard about your cooking school. I'm new to town and I don't know many people yet, but I'd love to learn from you, if you have space. I always have space for someone willing to work. I am. Willing to work, I mean. I came here alone, like you did. No family, just a job prospect that fell through. Everyone keeps telling me I should find a husband or go back east, but... She stopped. I don't want to. I want to make it work here. Mara saw herself in this girl. The determination mixed with fear. The refusal to give up even when it would be easier. Come to the ranch Saturday morning. We'll see what you're capable of. Rebecca became another student. Then another success story. Within 6 months, she was managing the kitchen at the Silver Dollar Saloon, earning wages that let her rent her own room, proving that a woman alone could not just survive but thrive. And with each girl who learned, each woman who chose work over convention, each small victory against the idea that there was only one acceptable path, the town shifted. Not completely, not everywhere. Mrs. Hutchkins still had her supporters, people who believed in the old ways and resented change. But they were quieter now, less certain of their righteousness. The tide had turned, and Mara had been the one to turn it. That winter, as snow piled against the ranch buildings and the cooking school took a brief hiatus until spring, Mara stood in her kitchen and took stock. She'd arrived in Coldwater 11 months ago with a carpet bag and $1. Now she had a home, a family, a business, and a reputation built on her own terms. The kitchen that had been her testing ground was now her kingdom. The people who judged her had either changed their minds or become irrelevant. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked, coming in from checking the horses. "How different everything is." "Better different or worse different?" "Better. Definitely better." She poured him coffee. "I was remembering that first day, standing in the street while you offered me marriage and the whole town watched. My worst moment, offering a solution to a problem I'd created by being too conventional to just hire a woman cook. And I refused, made a spectacle of myself. Made yourself clear, there's a difference." He sipped the coffee. "Do you ever regret it? The way things happened?" "No. If I'd accepted that first proposal, I'd have always wondered if I could have made it on my own. This way I know I could have. The marriage was my choice, not my only option. That matters to you. More than almost anything." She leaned against the counter. "I needed to prove I wasn't desperate, that my value didn't depend on being rescued. You proved that 10 times over. And you proved you could see past convention to what actually worked. That's rarer than you think." They smiled at each other. These two practical people who'd built something solid out of necessity and made it genuine through respect. Elsie appeared in the doorway, 15 now and taller than Mara. "The Patterson girls are here for their lesson." "Already? I thought they were coming at 10. "It is 10. You were lost in thought." Mara checked the clock. "Sure enough." "Tell them I'll be right there." She untied her apron, then tied on a clean one. "Teaching apron," she called it. The girls liked that she treated their lessons seriously enough to change aprons for them. Before she left the kitchen, she paused at the window. The view that had become familiar, the barn, the corrals, the mountains in the distance, the landscape that had given her space to become who she was meant to be. She thought about the woman who'd arrived here nearly a year ago. Exhausted, scared, determined not to show it. That woman had been running from failure and toward a last chance. This woman, Mrs. Mara Ward, cook, teacher, partner, stepmother, wasn't running from or toward anything. She was exactly where she chose to be, doing exactly what she chose to do. And that made all the difference. The Patterson girls were waiting in the teaching area, a corner of the kitchen Mara had set up with extra workspace. They were practicing bread, working through the stages of kneading and rising. "Remember," Mara told them, "bread is about patience. You can't rush it. You can't force it. You have to work with it, understand what it needs, give it time." "Like people?" one of the girls asked. "Exactly like people." She moved among them, correcting technique, answering questions, watching them gain confidence with each successful loaf. This was her work now, not just feeding people, but teaching them to feed themselves, giving them skills that would serve them for life. As the lesson wrapped up and the girls gathered their things, Sarah arrived to collect them. "How did they do?" "Excellent. They're both ready to move on to pastry next week." "Perfect." Sarah handed over the lesson fee. "Also, I have 3 more girls who want to join. Can you handle 15 students?" "If we split them into 2 sessions, beginners in the morning, advanced in the afternoon." "That works. I'll arrange it." Sarah hesitated. "You know, when I first suggested this school, I thought it would be nice supplemental income. I didn't realize it would become something bigger." "Bigger how?" "You're changing how these girls see themselves, how they see their possibilities. That's worth more than any money." After they left, Mara cleaned up the teaching area and started dinner preparations. The rhythm was familiar now, the daily work of keeping a household fed and a business running. It was exhausting and satisfying in equal measure. That evening, the whole household gathered for dinner as usual. Caleb and Elsie, Dutch, and Frank, and Tommy, and the other hands. They filled the kitchen with noise and warmth, passing dishes and telling stories about their day. "Mrs. Ward," Tommy said, "I've been thinking about that bread lesson you gave the girls today, about patience and not forcing things." "What about it?" "I think it applies to breaking horses, too. Been trying to rush a young mare, getting frustrated. Maybe I need to work with her instead of against her." Probably. That's what I mean. He gestured with his fork. You teach cooking, but it's really bigger than that. It's about understanding how things work and respecting the process. Or, Dutch interjected, maybe sometimes bread is just bread and we're reading too much into it. Everyone laughed and the conversation moved on to other topics. But Mara sat quietly, thinking about Tommy's observation. Maybe he was right. Maybe what she'd been teaching all along wasn't just cooking, but a way of approaching the world. With patience and competence and refusal to accept that there was only one right way to do things. After dinner, after the dishes were done and the house had quieted, Mara found herself back on the porch. The sky was clear, stars sharp and bright in the cold air. Caleb joined her as he often did these quiet evenings. Long day. Good day, she corrected. There's a difference. There is. He was quiet for a moment. I got a letter today from the territorial governor's office. Her stomach clenched. About Elsie? About you. Apparently Garrett mentioned your cooking school in his report. They're asking if you'd be willing to consult on setting up similar programs in other territories, teaching frontier women practical skills for self-sufficiency. Mara stared at him. They want me to teach other women to do what I did? Seems like it. They'd pay for your time and travel. You'd be gone maybe a week at a time, few times a year. What did you tell them? Nothing yet. Wanted to talk to you first. He leaned against the porch railing. It's a big opportunity. Recognition that what you're doing matters beyond just this ranch. But it would mean leaving, being away from the school, from Elsie, from... She stopped. From here. I know. He smiled slightly. But it would also mean spreading what you've built, helping other women find the same independence you found. Isn't that worth something? She thought about it. About traveling to other towns, other territories. Meeting women who were where she'd been a year ago, desperate, determined, trying to carve out a place in a world that didn't want to make room for them. Yes, she said finally, it's worth something, if you and Elsie can manage without me for short periods. We managed before you came. We'll manage again. He touched her shoulder briefly. Besides, you'll come back. You always come back to what matters. And that was true. This ranch, this odd family she'd built, this life she'd chosen, they mattered more than anything, but that didn't mean she couldn't also do more. Over the next year, Mara traveled to 3 different territories, teaching women to establish their own cooking schools, their own paths to independence. Each time she left, she missed home. Each time she returned, she was grateful for what she'd built. The Ward Ranch Cooking School grew to 20 regular students. Sarah became a full partner in the business. Elsie started teaching the younger students basic skills, discovering she had a gift for patient instruction. And Mrs. Hutchkins, slowly and without fanfare, faded into the background. Not gone, but no longer the dominant force in town. Her power had rested on people's fear of judgment, and once enough people stopped caring about her judgment, the power evaporated. Sometimes Mara saw her in town, and they'd exchange curt nods. Not friendship, never that, but acknowledgement that they'd fought their battle and it was over. 2 years after Mara's arrival, on a warm spring morning, she stood in her kitchen preparing breakfast as usual. But this time, there were 2 additional people at the table, visiting instructors from a school in Wyoming, there to learn her teaching methods. The key, she was explaining, is making sure they understand the why, not just the how. Anyone can follow a recipe. Real skill comes from understanding the principles behind it. The instructors took notes, asked questions, treated her like an expert, which she supposed she was. After they left, Caleb found her sitting on the porch steps, looking tired but satisfied. You're making a difference, you know, a real one. I'm teaching people to cook. You're teaching people to believe in themselves. The cooking is just the method. She leaned back against the step, feeling the sun warm on her face. When I arrived here, all I wanted was a job, a place to work. I wasn't trying to change anything. But you did anyway, because you refused to accept the limits other people wanted to put on you. Is that what I did? That's exactly what you did. He sat down beside her. And you taught Elsie to do the same, and all those girls in your classes, and probably half the women in this territory by now. I just wanted to cook. You wanted to choose. There's a difference. They sat in comfortable silence, these 2 people who'd built a partnership out of necessity and made it genuine through steady effort. Not perfect, not romantic, but real and lasting. Elsie appeared with the telegram. This just came. It's from Helena. Mara read it quickly. An invitation to speak at a territorial women's convention about economic independence through skill development. They were offering an honorarium that was more than she made in a month from the cooking school. Are you going to do it? Elsie asked. I don't know. Public speaking isn't... You talk to students all the time. That's different. That's teaching. This is teaching too, just a bigger audience. Caleb stood, brushing dust from his pants. You should do it. Tell your story. Let people hear how far you've come. My story isn't that interesting. A woman arrives with nothing, refuses to be controlled, builds a business, changes a town, and ends up consulting across territories? Elsie grinned. That sounds pretty interesting to me. Mara looked at the telegram again. Thought about standing in front of a crowd, telling them about refusing that first proposal, about winning the cooking competition, about every small victory that had led to this moment. All right, she said, I'll do it. The convention was in September. Mara traveled to Helena with Caleb and Elsie, who'd insisted on coming to support her. The hall was packed with women from across the territory, all of them hungry for stories of women succeeding in unconventional ways. When Mara stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, she felt the same nervousness she'd felt that first morning cooking breakfast for the ranch hands. The same fear that she wasn't good enough, that she'd be exposed as a fraud. But then she thought about everything that had happened since that morning. Every meal cooked, every student taught, every small battle won. And she started talking. I came to Coldwater, Montana, with $1 in my boot and a job offer in my pocket. What I didn't know was that the job offer came with expectations I had no intention of meeting. The town expected me to be grateful for charity, to accept my place, to understand that a woman alone was a problem that needed solving through marriage. The room was silent, attentive. I refused, not because I'm brave, but because I'm stubborn, and that refusal changed everything. She told them the whole story. The public proposal, the town's judgment, the cooking competition, saving the men from the storm, starting the school. She told them about Mrs. Hutchkins and the territorial investigation and the slow, grinding work of proving herself day after day. What I learned, she said, is that respect isn't given. It's earned through competence and maintained through consistency. People will judge you regardless of what you do. The question is whether you let their judgment define you or whether you define yourself through your work. After the speech, women crowded around her with questions. How did you start your school? How did you handle the opposition? How did you know you wouldn't fail? I didn't know, she told them honestly. I just knew that failing while trying was better than never trying at all. On the train ride back to Coldwater, Elsie curled up against Mara's shoulder. I'm proud of you, she said sleepily, for everything you've done. I'm proud of you too, for growing into someone who knows her own worth. I learned that from you. You learned it from yourself. I just showed you it was possible. When they got home, the ranch welcomed them back with the familiar smells of Dutch's attempted cooking. Not great, but earnest, and the warm chaos of men trying to manage on their own. Don't ever leave again, Tommy begged. We've been eating beans for 3 days. I was gone for 5 days. Felt like forever. Mara laughed and reclaimed her kitchen, restoring order through the simple act of making a decent meal. This was what she was good at, what she loved. Not the speeches or the recognition, but the daily work of feeding people and teaching them to feed themselves. That night, lying in her narrow bed in her small room, Mara thought about the journey that had brought her here, about the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become, about the town that had tried to break her and instead gave her a place to grow roots so deep nothing could pull them up. She thought about Mrs. Hutchkins, about Dutch and Tommy and Frank, about Sarah and all the students who'd passed through her kitchen, about Caleb, who'd learned to be a true partner, and Elsie, who'd become the daughter she never expected to have. And she thought about all the women out there who were where she'd been 2 years ago, scared and determined, carrying everything they owned and hoping it would be enough. It would be enough. She'd proven that. Not because she was special or unusually talented, but because she'd refused to accept that there was only one way to live, one path to follow, one definition of worth. She'd chosen her own path, built her own worth, made her own place. And in doing so, she'd shown others they could do the same. That was the real victory, not the cooking school or the business or the respect she'd earned, but the knowledge that she'd lived according to her own terms and survived. Thrived even. The woman who'd arrived in cold water with nothing had built everything that mattered. And she wasn't done yet. There were more students to teach, more meals to cook, more women to inspire, more battles to fight, not with anger but with competence, more proof to offer that a woman could stand alone and be whole. Maribel Ward had found what she'd been searching for all along. Not a place to hide, not a man to save her, not approval from people who'd never understand. She'd found herself. And that was worth more than any blue ribbon or territorial commendation or town's grudging respect. She'd found the freedom to choose. And once you had that, nothing else could touch you. Outside her window, the Montana night stretched endlessly, dark and full of stars. The same sky that had greeted her 2 years ago, but she saw it differently now. Not as something vast and intimidating, but as possibility, as promise. Tomorrow she'd wake early and make breakfast. Teach an afternoon class. Plan next week's menu. Do all the small, essential things that built a life worth living. And she'd do it all as herself. Fully, completely, unapologetically. That was the only victory that mattered, the only one that ever had.